Hello everyone, if you're new to my channel, consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do that. Thanks. By the way, I also have another Naruto and Luffy fanfiction channel. If you are interested, link is in the description.
The Storm Pirates by Drinor. What if Luffy never ate the Gomu Gomu no Mi? Instead, he devours the Arashi Arashi no Mi, the Storm fruit, gaining the power of tempests, lightning, and wind itself. With the power of the storm in his hands, Monkey D. Luffy will turn the world upside down and forge a new legend as the captain of the Storm Pirates. Big shout out to the warlords of this channel: Throat Punch, Rodarius Jones, Native Warrior, Claude Lefrace, Neoesker 23, Derek Dowdy, Zazu Syaz, Abdul Rauf Ali, N3WT, What If Lord, Black Money Young Leon, Garrick Russell, Case Clark, KSGPL4YZ, and Brian McKenzie. You know who you are. Want to stand among the warlords? Join the channel membership and show your support. Adios.
Hundreds of fir trees flanked the river the Straw Hats were sailing up to reach the island's heart. The mountains were colossal in size. They were all cylindrical, with a flat plateau on top. In certain spots, the huge peaks burst through the clouds, and each mountain had to be at least a couple of kilometers tall. The Drum Rockies were a massive and magnificent sight to see. "Are we going the right way?" Luffy asked the head doctor as he looked forward. He could feel several new voices as the ship sailed forward. He knew there was a possibility that they might need to fight, but all the Straw Hat captain could think now was getting Nico to a doctor. "Yes, Captain Sir, we should arrive very soon," the head doctor replied, standing close to the captain, who had a serious look. Nami was looking forward with concern while Zoro was cleaning his swords. "Do you think these people will accept pirates?" Zoro suddenly asked. The moment he said those words, several guns were aimed at them. "Pirates, turn your ship around. You're not welcome in this place." The crew on deck heard a booming voice calling out to them. Armed, angry-looking guys gazed at them from the banks around the lake. "And that answers it," Zoro murmured under his breath. "We are going nowhere." Nami spoke firmly as she gazed at the people who were aiming guns at them. She wondered if she should just fight but knew she shouldn't do it out of nowhere without Luffy's permission, but she hoped they wouldn't dare to touch Nico. "We need a doctor for my sister," Nami quickly added, hoping it would make them believe that they weren't here to harm them, but it seemed the mention of Dr. Kureha only made them warier. "There are no doctors available to help you. This is our homeland. Pirates are not permitted to enter," one of the armed guys screamed, pointing his gun at Nami, who didn't show any sign of being afraid. Knowing things could escalate quickly, Luffy walked forward, standing in front of his crew. "We are not here to hurt anyone. We only need Dr. Kureha. We need her help. One of our crewmates is very sick." Luffy spoke firmly towards the people with guns, knowing this would draw all their attention towards him. "How did you find out about the witch?" one asked, more like screaming as almost all of the weapons were pointed toward Luffy. "They informed me." Luffy pointed to the doctors who were trying to hide. "They suggested Dr. Kureha may be able to help me with my nakama. Please bring her here. I'll pay her." "That's the Isho 20, exclaims a guy who screamed angrily. "They're with Wapple." With that said, every man suddenly started aiming their guns at each one of the Straw Hats, their hands shaking slightly, but they needed to protect their home from pirates like them. Their fingers were dangerously close to the trigger of their respective weapons. Seeing the situation escalating quickly, Zoro prepared to use his swords to protect his crew and the captain from the upcoming bullets. Sanji prepared to fight using his legs to break their weapons and stop the bullets. Due to her observation Haki, Nami could see the attack coming. Her body was quickly engulfed in red fire, especially her arms that turned to gold. If they dared to harm her sister or her crew, she would make them pay. Usopp prepared his rifle to shot back, but it seemed that was completely unnecessary due to Luffy causing an enormous lightning bolt to echo around them like a war cry, causing every man that had aimed their guns at the pirate crew to freeze in fear, their ears booming like bells in their heads, warning them, every part of their body telling them not to attack the pirate crew, especially the captain. Luffy's eyes had gone from warm to ice cold, his straw hat covering his eyes, making him more menacing. "We are here only to cure our crewmate. If you want to throw your lives away, then step forward," Luffy finished with a voice that sounded so threatening that it made even his own crew feel a chill on their bodies. The others were shaking like leaves. One soon stopped shaking before raising his hand in surrender. "Very well," he said. The enormous guy gulped hard. With slicked black hair and a goatee, he was a tall and intimidating guy. He was dressed in a long, white fur-lined green tunic with armor plates. He donned heavy boots and a green and white fur-lined cap with ear flaps to protect himself from the island's extreme cold. He was armed with an extra-large shovel, which he carried in a scabbard on his back. "Come with me to the village, and I'll show you the way." "Thank you," Luffy quickly said before turning to his crew. "Come on. We need to get her to Dr. Kureha as soon as possible," Luffy ordered. The crew didn't need to be told twice. As the doctors started moving her, she was covered with several blankets to keep her warm from the cold. Nami was walking close to her, keeping an eye on her despite knowing she could do absolutely nothing to help her sister. The men with guns stepped away, some with fear that whatever sickness she had could get to them, while some hoped for her to get better soon. The snow was thick, very thick, making it hard to walk. Everyone could feel the cold. Luffy just brushed it off. For some reason, it didn't bother him as much as he thought. He didn't know why and didn't care to know. The guy helping them soon introduced himself as Dalton. Who exactly was this Wapol? Never thought a leader of a country would turn into a pirate, Luffy asked curiously, remembering the stupid people who attacked them. This place was always known for the good doctors. People came from far away to get healed, and the king was a good man. It was an honor to serve him, the man explained with a puff of his chest. But then his face changed to a grim one, remembering when everything changed for the worse. When Wapol became king, it didn't take long for everyone to see what kind of king he was. He requested that all 20 of the country's greatest doctors join him permanently, and any who refused were executed on the spot. All of this was done in order for him to have a grip on the nation and force everyone to rely on him and his whims for medical care. No one took what the man said well, but Vivi was literally boiling. She was a princess. When her father would eventually step down, she would make sure to become the best ruler Alabasta ever had. This country was attacked by 5 pirates, who almost destroyed this place. They had incredible strength. We never stood a chance. One of them especially was different from the others. His whole body was covered in darkness, and his eyes were terrifying. One moment he was a normal person, laughing and making jokes, the next he was the devil himself. The man finished with a shudder. The Straw Hats except Luffy suddenly felt a shiver through their entire bodies. "So he ran away like a coward," Nami said with anger. She was no ruler, but even she understood the importance of ruling and sacrificing for the greater good of your people and not running away like a coward with your tails between your legs. That coward never even attempted to fight. He just raced to the water with his tail between his legs. He abandoned us all to preserve his own skin. With a gloomy expression on his face, Dalton crushed out his words. The bastard! The princess could no longer keep herself in control anymore. She knew from her father that there were people who were terrible kings. Bad rulers who cared little about their own people only if they could sit their ass on the throne. All they cared was to play their little game of thrones. Who would rule and who would die. But thinking that someone like Wapol would simply abandon his country like this made her blood boil. "Hey, Vivi, the bastard is gone," Nami reminded her, trying to ease her anger. The princess was usually cheerful and always positively looked at things. But the words Dalton was saying made her lose it. "You meet him, right?" Dalton asked as he pointed at the doctors walking behind them, carrying Nico, who was breathing heavily. Need an answer. The doctors Wapol took with him were here, but he wondered what happened to the bastard. Sanji left out a mocking chuckle at the thought of the man who called himself Kane. "He tried to take our ship and everything we had, so he did what any normal pirate would do in that situation. We killed his crew and him. Except the doctors," Luffy said casually, as if it was no big deal. To the Straw Hats this was just another Tuesday. Dalton gasped at what the captain pirate just said before his eyes went to the doctors, waiting for them to confirm it. They simply nodded their heads. No point in lying, and it was not as if any of them had any kind of empathy towards the dead king. Dalton wondered how they could have done it. Wapol had strong people with him, but the giant thunderbolt from the captain back when he threatened them was still a little too fresh in his mind, so he didn't ask how they did it. He decided to ask only one question. How did Wapol die? Dalton asked with no remorse or any kind of sign to show that he felt bad for what happened, more surprised than anything else. I launched a lightning bolt at him, making a big hole on his chest, Luffy simply said. He would never show mercy against people who dared to harm his crew or threaten them, no exceptions. Then you have our heartfelt gratitude, Dalton spoke with a bow of his head towards Luffy. When the pirates approached their kingdom, they thought they were doomed, but instead, they got the best news they could have ever gotten. Get the word out to everyone on the island. Wapol is no longer alive, and we are free. The crew soon reached the town of Bighorn, which was closer to the massive Drum Rockies. As they made their way, they encountered hiking bears. Usopp was the first to spot them, hoping they weren't dangerous, but Dalton quickly eased his fear, saying they were harmless if you bowed to them, and much to the crew's surprise, the bear gave them a nod after they bowed. Arriving at the town, the crew soon saw the way Dalton was looked with respect by the citizens, especially the way everyone greeted him, some even bowing respectfully to him. Vivi couldn't help but grin as they strolled through town, seeing how well Dalton was valued. She wondered if Dalton could rule the kingdom now that Wapol was dead. The island would need a new leader, and who better than someone everyone respected. Arriving at Dalton's house, the crew quickly walked inside, followed by at least 5 doctors. The others decided to stay outside since Dalton's house was already crowded with just the pirate crew, not counting the 5 doctors. Dalton quickly started a fire with Luffy's help, who used his devil fruit to suck the water from the wood so it could burn faster and easier. It was one of the abilities of the storm fruit, but Luffy could do it only to small things, not big things like trees or living beings. I'm sorry about the fire. I wasn't really expecting visitors, Dalton apologized, removing his coat and hanging it on a chair. Don't worry about it. Nami dismissed him with a wave of her hand, looking worriedly at her sister. Check on her, Dalton quickly added, pointing towards the blue-haired girl who was breathing heavily. The navigator quickly nodded before checking her temperature with a thermometer. 155. This is bad, she gasped, her eyes widening in fear for her sister. Her face quickly returned to normal. There was no need to panic, don't panic, she told herself repeatedly. The doctor would soon take care of her. She's my sister, she will get through this as if nothing ever happened, Nami said, stroking her blue hair, just like how their mother used to do when they were little. Her face was all red, her breathing was heavy, feeling her throat burning like fire, and her whole body felt weak. What is she suffering from? Can't you heal her? Dalton asked, looking at the 5 doctors who were inside. The one in the front shook his head with a grim look on his face. We don't know what she has, we tried everything, but nothing works. The only hope left for her is Dr. Kureha, the main doctor spoke. Then you are in the right place. Dr. Kureha can heal any sickness. Your friend will be better in no time, Dalton said with an uplifting tone, hoping it would help. What are we waiting for then? Tell me where she is. I will get her to Dr. Kureha in no time, Luffy said firmly towards Dalton, whose face became grim at what the pirate asked, knowing it wouldn't be so simple. It's up there. Dalton groaned and pointed out the window to the Drum Rocky's biggest peak. Did you see the castle? He asked them. Wapol had lived there before fleeing the nation, and his father had lived there before him. Dr. Kureha took up residence when Wapol departed. We'll need her to come down then. This is an emergency, so call her. Sanji spoke out as he gazed up at the mountain before returning his gaze to Dalton. It's not as easy as that. With a shake of his head, Dalton expressed his dissatisfaction with the situation. I'm worried we won't be able to reach her. Why the hell not? Luffy asked, but more like shouting, he was slowly losing his patience. She comes down only once in a while to check for patients. If anyone is sick and needs her help, whoever she heals is forced to pay her. That's why everyone calls her a witch, Dalton explained with a grave tone. Geez, no wonder everyone calls her a witch, Usopp commented, never heard of this kind of doctor before. Yes, and not mentioning that she's 139 years old, Dalton added, causing the whole pirate crew to gasp in shock. What the hell do people eat here to make them live this long? Sanji asked, perplexed. He had heard of people living a long life, almost reaching 100 years old, but this doctor was on steroids to live that long. Meanwhile, Luffy wondered how his grandpa would react to meeting someone even older than him. He usually always boasted to them that he was older, and because of that, they needed to respect him for whatever reason. Is there any way to get to her? Luffy asked, his voice sounding a bit desperate. If the worst came to worse, he would climb the mountain with his bare hands if he had to. I don't know, but I've heard tales. According to what I've heard, she'll ride a sled down the mountain on moonlight evenings. People claim to have seen it, and they always report that a bizarre beast accompanies her. I'm not going to let her suffer another day. We'll have to bring Nico to the doctor if we can't get the doctor to come to us, Luffy said categorically. Guys, go get some rope for me. If I have to climb the stupid mountain, I'll get her up there. You'll never make it up that mountain. It's 10 kilometers tall. Dalton lifted his voice to be heard over the crew's murmuring. There's a path up the mountain, but we don't have the power to go there. Which path are you talking about? Luffy and Dalton locked gazes. And what precisely do you mean by power it? The castle plateau has a lift that carries visitors to the peak, but Wapol didn't want people to visit since almost everyone was complaining to him. Some for a good reason, and some were just reminding him how much of a shitty king he was, going as far as to tell him that his father would be ashamed of what he became, Dalton said with a sigh. When he left, he took out the batteries. We can't charge the damn lift, he quickly added with a grim face. But with my devil fruit, I can directly power it, Luffy said as his whole arm was covered in lightning. This earned a smile from the large man, who quickly nodded his head. I think you can, with a confident grin. Dalton nodded to the captain. When Wapol departed, the lift was left at the foot of the ropeway. We fixed what we could, but it would never work without a new battery. But if you can get the engine to function, you shouldn't have any problems. Dalton, show us where this lift is. As he gazed at Nico, Luffy asked. Sure, please follow me. Dalton got gang-dashed back out into the snow. Nico had dozed off again as her stretcher was wheeled across town, and the Isho 20's physicians continued to struggle to keep her stable. They didn't have to wait long to get to the lift. The ropeway was just outside of Bighorn, and the lift was still resting on the platform. Luffy was shown the engine by Dalton, and the Straw Hat captain began to work. He raised his hand up, and a bolt of lightning struck his arm, engulfing it in lightning before putting it on the engine. Luffy gradually increased the power until the lift started to move and the engine whirred to life. Now that he understood how much electricity to provide the machine, he instantly cut the power. Let's get going. We don't want to keep Nico waiting any longer than necessary. Nami rushed the Isho 20, as well as the rest of the Straw Hats and Dalton, aboard the elevator. Luffy restarted the motor after everyone was aboard and Nico was safely secured. The elevator started to move again with a buzzing sound. They gradually ascended the ropeway, rising higher and higher into the air until they were far over the trees. The cold landscape spread out under the lift, but the Straw Hats were too preoccupied to notice. As it followed the ropeway, the lift resumed its ascent. As the gusts became stronger, the lift swayed back and forth. Everyone was doing all they could to keep Nico and themselves in check. The lift eventually climbed above the clouds and winds. The party exhaled a sigh of relief as they approached the peak. As they approached the peak's platform, Luffy reduced the motor's power, and Dalton applied the brake. The brakes were secured with a lever flick, and the passengers could descend onto the summit plateau. Nico, we're nearly there. As they carried the sleeping woman's stretcher inside the castle, Luffy murmured to her. Many folks were perplexed as to why the enormous entrance door was closed. However, no one really questioned it. Everyone was focused on bringing Nico to Dr. Kureha as soon as possible. How is she going to hear us? Luffy asked Dalton, who turned to look at Luffy before looking at the enormous gate in front of them. We can just knock, it might take a while, but she will eventually hear us, he said, turning to walk towards the door and suddenly hearing numerous thunders around him as if a thunderstorm suddenly engulfed them. Knowing the lightning and the thunderstorm might not be enough, Luffy took a deep breath. Get over here, you old witch! Luffy shouted at the top of his lungs, causing the weather to change slightly, snowing more than usual, which was quite something hard to achieve for a place like the Drum Kingdom. Crazy old witch! What was that? A strange reindeer spoke with a shaken voice. It seems that the castle has a guest, damn it. I knew I should have worn better clothes, an older lady responded. What should we do? The reindeer asked, still with a shaken voice. Of course, we go there and see what all the fuss is about. You know we always welcome our guests with open arms. Dr. Kureha guffawed as she drew a bottle of liquor from a sled bag. It's possible that someone has delivered a patient to us. Chopper, let's go. Yes, Doctorine, Chopper said as he sped over the snow, the sled trailing behind him. The lightning calmed down a short time later. None of them knew that Chopper's life would soon change forever. My name is Dracul Mahawk, the Night Blade, and I have never known defeat, Mahawk probably. Kureha and Chopper were walking through the castle, towards the main double door that led inside the castle. Both knew something was urgent. To hear someone scream, calling her old witch was both amusing and insulting. Chopper had returned to his normal form, to look less dangerous, despite knowing they would most likely avoid him. There was only one person who ever saw him as just Chopper, or maybe two now. It has been years now that Dr. Kureha was taking care of Chopper, and even learning from her. Despite having a heart of steel, Chopper still knew she was a good person. Now, as they got closer, they both felt the sudden tension around the air. It was suffocating, at least for Chopper, who wasn't used to this kind of feeling. At that point, he was starting to get scared at the thought of who was behind the door. He could just by smelling the air around him know there were many people behind the door. Doctorina, there are over 20 people behind the door, Chopper informed her, keeping his eyes on the door. While Chopper was afraid of whoever was behind the big door, Kureha wasn't intimidated in the slightest. While she knew at least one of them behind the door was very powerful, she knew people came to her so she could heal someone, not actually to fight. Not mentioning Kureha had lived many years, she was at that age that she didn't really fear death or anyone. Don't worry, Chopper, now let's greet our special guests, Kureha said with a snarky tone before walking forward. Chopper quickly followed her behind. Opening the door, Kureha quickly recognized 20 of them almost immediately. The way her gaze fell upon those that abandoned their people to serve that king made all 20 doctors look down in shame. Where's Pig Wapple? Kureha quickly noticed the boy with the straw hat. She could tell just by looking at him that the person in charge of this little group was him. Then, her eyes fell upon the sick person, which was held by the 20 doctors on a carrying bed. Her doctor instinct quickly kicked in, seeing her face. Let me check on her, Kureha promptly said as she walked over to the girl. She didn't know the crew but figured they could introduce each other later. Luffy did not attempt to stop her as Kureha quickly checked on Nijiko. The village told him that she was old and the lady in front of them perfectly fitted her description. It only took a few seconds before she stood up, turning to the small strange tanuki. Bring her inside. Chopper gather antibiotics needed for Kesti's disease, Kureha ordered. Soon, Nijiko was carried inside by the doctors. Luffy noticed how the 20 doctors paled when they heard the name of whatever sickness Nijiko had. Luffy knew whatever it was a bad sickness. Just the way Nijiko was right now was enough to tell him that much. Soon, Nijiko was put in a bed, and Kureha quickly started treating her, mixing some drugs with water using a spoon. The strange tanuki named Chopper soon returned with a syringe, holding several pills and bottles. Can you save her? Luffy asked with cautious hope in his voice. Nami pursed her lips into a thin line, looking at Nijiko, praying her sister would survive. Yes, don't worry. You bought her just at the right moment. If you hadn't come here for 2 more days, then she would be dead by now, Kureha explained as she filled the syringe with liquid. The Straw Hat crew were both relieved and paled at what the doctor just said, especially Nami, who sighed in relief. Hearing her sister would survive. Suddenly, she felt as if a huge weight was suddenly removed, allowing her to breathe again without the dread that Nijiko wouldn't survive. Nami glanced at her sister, the doctor, whoever she was, started injecting the syringe into her arm. Her sister barely reacted except with a slight wince, but it ended soon. Taking a bottle, she poured a bit of alcohol on the small wound left by the injection. Thank you for helping her, Luffy said, bowing his head at her. No need for that, young man. It is my job as a doctor to help people. You should also thank these so-called doctors, they were with you. I can tell they helped her, Kureha said, pointing at the 20 doctors who straightened up when her attention turned to them. Almost like soldiers ordered by their commander. Yay, they did. Luffy quickly confirmed with a nod. Kureha chuckled slightly before deciding to ask something that she had asked herself since seeing them again on Drum Island and not in the company of that so-called king. Now, please enlighten me. Where is King Wapple? She asked with a sneer when she said his name before drinking whiskey. washing away the bad taste his name left in her mouth. At the bottom of the ocean, Luffy answered with a serious and dark look, to think someone as worthless as that man was actually a king. Luffy knew Vivi was 10 times the ruler he could ever hope to be. Kakakakaka, so the pig finally bites the dust, she said, laughing before raising her whiskey bottle in the air with her arm. Did you hear that, Hiralik? It seems we are finally free, she shouted to the sky with a melancholy look on her face but laughing at the same time. The Straw Hat crew didn't know who this Hiralik was, but seeing the way the doctors looked down when his name was mentioned, it must mean he was a good man. Now that she's out of the danger, tell me how exactly she got this sickness, Kureha asked curiously as she scooted out a chair before sitting down. Turning the chair around to face the crew who were still standing, behind Kureha was a large table with multiple different drinks. You can sit down. No need to stand up like carrots, Kureha said, putting her elbows behind her on the desk, supporting herself, the whiskey bottle in her hand. She took a quick sip from it. The pirate crew had already sat down. The orange girl, who Kureha quickly realized was the navigator of this crew due to the log pose on her wrist. The one with a long nose was probably a mechanic or something like that. The blonde one was most likely the chef of the ship due to his clean hands, and not mentioning he smelled of different vegetables and all sort of different dishes, that must mean he was the chef. Through her many years, she had seen many different pirate crews, even the crew of someone like Gold D. Roger. Kureha still remembered the rookie. When she met him, he was only a rookie, someone who was still trying to make a name for himself. Looking at the captain now, she had recognized that straw hat right away. It was a symbol. Roger, despite having that hat for quite some time. His flag was never a skull with a straw hat. The 20 doctors tried to find a place to sit as well, but Kureha turned to them with a glare. What do you think you're doing? Go to the village and check if everyone is alright. You have already wasted enough time being in the crew with that king, Kureha ordered with a stern tone. The doctors, one by one, quickly bowed their heads before doing exactly what she was ordering them to do. Luffy was quite surprised by her tone. It reminded him of his grandpa. His voice alone could make anyone do what he ordered them to do, except, of course, being Luffy, Ace, and Sabo. Where did she get that sickness? Kureha asked again, looking at Luffy again, who leaned ahead from his chair. She got sick like a day after we left Little Garden, Luffy answered. Kureha grimaced at that. Wow, you guys are very lucky. The government for a long time had tried to destroy the insect that causes this sickness. Of course, this world is large, and they never fully killed every last one, and you just happened to visit one of few islands in the world that had Kestia still around, she explained. The crew didn't think this was actually luck, especially Nami. To think, out of all the islands in the world, this one had that bug, almost killing one of them. Chopper soon returned with a towel soaked. Kureha smiled at him before putting the towel on her fore. The towel had several pieces of ice inside that Chopper got outside. Standing up, she turned at the pirate crew. Very well, now that the danger is out of the way. Who are you, people? Kureha asked, eyeing each one. Luffy stepped forward. I'm Monkey D. Luffy, this is my crew, and we are the Straw Hat Pirates, he said, pointing towards his crew as he introduced them one by one. Kureha's eyes twitched slightly when she heard the name, D, on the young boy's name. He's a D then. That's quite surprising. It has been a long time since I met one, she thought with a melancholy look on her face, but she quickly turned her face to a happy one with a devil smirk. I see, you're quite young to be pirates, but so were many others. Even the king of the pirates started from somewhere, she said, grabbing a bottle of whiskey, drinking it directly from the bottle. Not bothering with pouring it on a small glass, she was no novice. Luffy smiled brightly at her, already liking her, though he noticed her subtle reaction at hearing his name. The captain quickly figured it must be because of his D on his name. Luffy didn't really know what it meant, but he figured he would find out eventually. He knew Ace had a D on his name as well, and according to the old man doctor with Laboon, Roger's real name was Gold D. Roger. Yes, and I'm going to become the king of the pirates, Luffy exclaimed with his fists raised in the air with a smile. Chopper's jaw hit the floor when he heard that. He knew just by looking at them that they were crazy, but this was beyond what he had originally thought. Kakakakaka, you're quite an interesting young man, but now we must talk about the payment, she said with a sneaky smirk while rubbing her hands together. Anything you want? Luffy quickly said with complete sincerity. This woman saved his nakama. He was ready to give her whatever she wanted, it didn't matter the price. Kureha quickly checked the reaction of the rest of the crew. Seeing them with folded arms and just waiting for her to speak the price, she knew they must be pretty close, which was a perfect thing for every pirate crew. Now for the ultimate test, to see if this crew really thought the same as their captain. No matter what crew it was, no matter how strong they were or their will or determination they had, if they didn't listen and respect their captain, that crew was doomed to fall like many others before them. I want 45% of your treasure, she demanded, grinning. The captain had no visible reaction at the price, and neither did the rest of the crew. Deal, Luffy quickly said, stretching out his arm for her to shake hands. Kureha looked at his eyes. She knew a pirate like him would go far. Just how far that remains to be seen. Deal, Kureha said before they both shook hands. The rest of the crew didn't protest or try to talk her down for a lower price. In her mind, this crew nailed everything down. With that out of the way, the crew turned to look at Chopper. Seeing how he helped and how Dr. Kureha entrusted him with helping to heal Nico, they knew he must be a doctor. Okay, Chopper, I'm leaving to prepare something. You take care of our patient and guests, Kureha said with a smirk, standing up. Of course, Doctorina, I will take care of her. Chopper accepted the job without a hint of doubt in his voice. Kureha had a sly smirk before leaving the room. Chopper was quick to change the cold towel on Nico's head, helping to keep her temperature steady. Despite taking medicine, it would take some time before she was fully healed and ready to leave. As he was doing his job, Luffy's eyes started to spark like stars in the night sky, something his crew noticed right away. Even Vivi figured immediately what was going through Luffy's head at this moment. Here we go, Nami murmured with an amused smile. Who are you? You must be a tanuki. You're also a doctor. That is super cool, Luffy exclaimed, smiling, walking forward, standing close to Nico's bed, and looking at Chopper, who was mixing a few ingredients on a bowl. Welcome to the crew, Nami murmured under her breath, knowing Chopper's fate was sealed in stone, and no matter what he did or said wouldn't change Luffy's mind if not convince him even more. What? I'm no tanuki, you moron. I'm a reindeer, Chopper shouted back with shark teeth, but the blush on his face showed that he enjoyed not being looked down. Wow, you're awesome. How about joining my crew? Luffy asked, the sparks on his eyes shining more, looking like a face with diamonds on his eyes. Jay, join your crew? Have you lost your mind? Can't you see I'm ugly? I'm a reindeer. I have a blue nose and just look at me. I'm a monster, Chopper screamed, but his dancing around as he said that completely contradicted it. He was clearly happy that Luffy was complimenting him. Nah, you're not ugly. You have quite a bright personality, not to mention how willingly you helped us. You're a beautiful tanuki, Luffy stated with a shake of his head, denying what Chopper said about himself. I'm no tanuki, you idiot, Chopper retorted back but with a big smile on his face, his body dancing around at the compliment. You must be a good doctor if Dr. Kureha entrusted you with our nakama? Luffy asked but more like a statement. Chopper rubbed his head in embarrassment. It was quite a new thing to be praised by someone that wasn't Kureha or his father. Well, Kureha has been teaching me since she started taking care of me. Before that, it was my father, Dr. Hiralik, who found me and took care of me, Chopper said with a sudden sad smile on his face as he remembered his father. The crew perked up at the name mentioned again by Chopper this time. Who is he? Vivi asked kindly, walking over to Chopper before putting a comforting hand on his shoulder, hoping to ease his sadness. Chopper appreciates it, feeling better already. He was a doctor. He found me alone, I needed help, and he took me in. He taught me about medicine, Chopper said with a growing smile. He must have been a good doctor. Usopp stated from what he heard up until now, that he must have been a good man. Well, Chopper suddenly said, rubbing his head, not exactly sure how to say this. This caused Nami to raise an eyebrow, noticing the hesitation. Well, Dr. Ina said his treatment was questionable. They worked sometimes but not always, Chopper explained, not wanting his father to look like a bad man or some kind of thief in front of the new people. Soon, Chopper found himself telling them about his life with Dr. Hiralik. By the end, everyone was quite saddened by the sad story. Luffy was about to ask Chopper again to join his crew when they heard a loud cough. Turning their necks so fast, Chopper was surprised they didn't snap their own necks. Nijiko, how are you feeling? Nijiko-san, they shouted before with big smiles, hearts in Sanji's case, walking up to her. Nami grabbed her hand, just looking at her. The navigator could see her sister was getting better. How are you feeling, Nijiko? Luffy asked, smiling at her, happy that she was better. I'm feeling better, she answered before looking around, not recognizing the place they were in. Her eyes turned to look at her sister. Where are we? She asked, confused. Nami quickly told her where they were after listening to every word. Nijiko quickly noticed Chopper, who was half hiding behind a chair. Wow, you're cute. What's your name? Nijiko asked, looking at the cute Tanuki. Her compliment had the desired reaction. Chopper started dancing around with a big smile. Name's Chopper, good to see you awake, Chopper said before checking on her again, asking a few questions about how she was feeling and if she was feeling dizzy. How long should I stay here? Nijiko asked, already feeling much better, but knowing she still wasn't able to stand up and walk around. Despite feeling better, she felt tired, and her legs felt numb. 1 more week at least, Dr. Ina won't allow you to take a step outside of this castle until you're healed. Chop bit her lower lip at the new information, but knowing Nijiko needed it to get better, she quickly accepted it. Luffy, on the other hand, was thinking of ways to convince the old doctor to allow Nijiko to leave after 3 days. After 3 days, join my crew, Luffy shouted yet again, for like the 100th time since coming here, chasing Chopper around, the poor Tanuki running around for his life, sometimes calling for Kureha's help, who would just laugh in amusement. Nami was with her sister and Vivi, drinking tea, looking over the window that showed Luffy chasing Chopper. The navigator had asked Sanji for some tea, and the chef was more than happy to serve them. They could hear the commotion outside. It was late morning. The moment they had eaten breakfast, Luffy had started chasing Chopper around, asking for him to join his crew. Zoro was training alone, doing push-ups with several weights around his body, not getting involved with his captain. Usopp was back at Going Merry, saying he needed to check on something and make sure the ship was ready to leave. The crew had quickly decided to leave on the 4th day. Nijiko could already walk around on her 3rd day. Now, she was slowly gaining her energy back. She still felt a bit tired, but it was better than just lying in a bed until she got bored to death. Back at Luffy, Chopper was on his knees. His breath labored. He felt that he had just run for hours without stopping. Behind him, the captain was just grinning like an idiot. Join my crew, Chopper, Luffy asked yet again, but at this point sounded more like an order. I see can't, Dr. Ina needs me, Chopper said, trying to convince him. He wasn't sure who he was trying to convince at this point. Luffy sat beside him with an understanding look on his face. Tell me, is there anything you want to achieve? He asked with sparks in his eyes. Chopper looked at him, surprised. He hadn't thought the pirate captain would be interested in his dream. Before looking forward again, the village below them, the sea beyond, the weather was quite warm today. Yes, I have a dream, Chopper confirmed. Luffy's eyes turned to stars hearing him say that. My dream is to be able to cure every disease of this world, Chopper admitted with a new fire in his eyes, something Luffy saw for the first time. That convinced him even more that Chopper was the perfect doctor for his crew. He immediately stood up, his fists raised in the air, his straw hat falling on the snow. Then it settled. You're our new nakama. Sail with us, Chopper. We will travel the whole world, and one day you will achieve your dream. Luffy shouted at the sky before grabbing the straw hat and putting it on Chopper's head. Chopper felt his eyes welling. He nodded. Yes, I will be your doctor, he declared, both smiling and crying at the same time, not noticing Kureha looking at him with a smile on her face. A tear rolled down her cheek, but she quickly wiped it away. Did you hear that, Hiralik? It seems our little Chopper is becoming a big boy, she murmured with a chuckle, ready to set her goodbye plan in motion. Later, no way in hell, Kureha yelled at Luffy, who was telling her that they needed to leave. The captain tried to tell her that Vivi's homeland was in a civil war and that she needed to get there as soon as possible, but it seemed all his words fell on deaf ears. I don't care if the end of the world is coming. My rules are that I don't discharge my patients unless they are healed or dead. Nijiko is clearly neither of those, so she will stay here, Kureha finished already making up her mind. Noticing that Chopper was eavesdropping from behind the door, but sadly for him, he hadn't accounted on his antlers sticking out, basically screaming, Come on, I'm here. Luffy wasn't ready to give up yet. He had already told his crew to prepare everything. They were just waiting for him, and Chopper, Usopp, was already on the ship, preparing to leave soon. Chopper will be with us. He can take care of us. He's a good doctor. Luffy stated, hoping that would fix the problem, but that seemed to do the opposite when Kureha glared at the place Chopper was hiding, making Tanuki feel a shiver on his small body. Is he now? She spoke darkly, taking Luffy by surprise since he could tell she was faking it, despite the acting being on top. Come here, Chopper, Kureha screamed, suddenly holding a battle axe out of nowhere in her hands. Both Luffy and Chopper screamed as she started chasing them like a maniac. The rest of the crew was waiting. Sanji was wondering what was taking so long when they both heard shouts of terror coming from the double door. Zoro arched an eyebrow when the door was slammed open by Luffy, followed closely by Chopper, who had turned into reindeer, running faster as Kureha was chasing and throwing axes that seemed were coming out of nowhere. We are leaving now, Luffy ordered. The crew didn't waste time and started using the lift to go down. Soon they reached the ship they were preparing to sail away. As they removed the ship's anchor, Going Merry started gaining speed. Hey, what's that? From the top of the mountain, Usopp spotted something burning and shouted out. The tallest point on which the castle was built. Everyone shifted their gaze to the peak of the mountain. As a series of explosions erupted over the castle, Chopper began to sob, and lovely pink snow began to fall. Doctorina, Chopper sobbed as he witnessed his father's wish for Sakura to blossom on their winter island come true. The towering, cylindrical drum rockies resembled cherry trees in full bloom, which everyone marveled at. It's stunning, Vivi shouted, her face beaming. Amazing, Usopp cheered loudly at the sight. That's a beautiful sight. Who knew the witch could think of something like this? Zoro chuckled as he remembered his days of training as a little boy. I had to be honest. This could be one of the most beautiful sights I have ever seen. While taking a puff of his cigarette, Sanji smiled up at the scene. Everywhere you go, you help people, Luffy. I couldn't ask for a better captain. As their hands clasped and their fingers interlocked, Nami grinned at Luffy. She. Luffy laughed as he watched the pink snow fall. Nami quickly clasped his face before kissing him on the lips. The captain returned the passion, his arm around her waist, bringing her closer. Kureha. 2 hours later the old witch was standing at the top of the mountain. The ship had disappeared from the horizon by now, but she kept looking where the ship had been. Thinking of her surrogate son, hoping him the best of luck. He's a big boy now. What do you think, Hiralik? She murmured before drinking from her bottle. Hearing footsteps, she glanced from the corner of her eye to see Dalton walking toward her with a bunch of posters. What is it? She asked the big man curiously. Dalton searched a bit until he grabbed a specific poster, giving it to Kureha, who chuckled. 70 million berries, not bad. The kid reminds me of him. He will become a great pirate, Kureha said, remembering a rookie a long time ago. I will turn this world upside down. Who? Dalton asked, looking at her with curiosity. Gold D. Roger, Chapter 28, Portgas D. Ace, Chapter 29, Ace, Whitebeard and Kaido. Chapter 30. A Wanted, D. Chapter 31, A Night of Love, and Chapter 32, A Drop of Water, are already available for patrons. Going Merry was sailing smoothly towards Alabasta. It had been a week since they left Drum Island. Nico had returned back to normal, much to the relief of the whole crew. When Chopper finally announced that Nico was cured and didn't need antibiotics anymore, everyone cheered. At that moment, Zoro pulled his favorite bottle with booze, filling a glass for everyone except Chopper, who, according to everyone, was still little. Rising it up in the air, quickly followed by everyone else. For Nico, Luffy cheered, soon followed by everyone else who drank. Even Sanji didn't deny the drink, even though he wasn't much into any kind of alcoholic drink. Usopp started coughing like crazy, feeling like his mouth was on fire. That night they celebrated, much to Nico's embarrassment, but still, it warmed her heart to see them like this. What is going on? The voice of her boss reached her ears, Crocodile, one of the 7 warlords of the sea. Standing behind Miss Sunday, Crocodile had a devil's smirk on his face, a cigarette between his teeth as he inhaled on it. Not much, just some small fries acting like a big deal, and people are praying for you to come and save them. Nico. Robin informed him, turning around to face her boss with a neutral look on her face. Her piercing blue eyes like ice, along with a pretty smile. A sneer escaped his lips before his eyes looked at his subordinate seriously. "I'm not interested in little kids playing pirates. I will deal with them soon enough. I'm interested in anything big that I should know about," Crocodile demanded, slowly menacingly approaching Robin. The woman didn't look fazed by his figure or his strength. "Well, apparently Portgas d'Ace has been seen in Sandy Island," Robin informed him, this time her voice a bit grave, mentioning the second in command of Whitebeard pirates. This new information caused Crocodile to stop dead on his track, his eyes narrowing slightly. "So, Whitebeard has sent one of his pets, or maybe he's here on its own, I wonder." "Any idea why Whitebeard's pet is here?" Crocodile prompted, his voice louder when he spoke the Emperor's name. Not many knew, but Crocodile deeply hated the Emperor, something no one knew why. A sly smirk grew on Robin's face as she put a hand on her right ear as if wanting to hear something far away. "A little ear told me he's searching for Blackbeard and Straw Hat Luffy, the same ones who defeated Mr. 3, Robin explained slyly. A groan escaped Crocodile's lips, when he had eventually figured that Mr. 3 had been defeated by a bunch of no-name pirates. He had been livid. But in the end, it didn't really matter. They were walking towards their own grave. Sooner or later they would arrive in Alabasta to stop him because of Princess Vivi. He would personally kill their captain, to show him why he was a warlord. "I see, I don't know who this Blackbeard is, but someone like the second commander of Whitebeard shouldn't be taken lightly." Crocodile spoke, knowing someone like him was dangerous, especially after his little incident in Sabaody with the celestial dragon, increasing his bounty in the process. "Should we engage him?" Robin asked carefully. While she didn't know Ace, she had been surprised by his actions in Sabaody. She didn't exactly want to fight him before she got some answers first. "No, if he is not after us, then we don't need to. As long as he's not a nail in our feet, then we have no business to step on it," Crocodile said before turning to walk towards the door that leads outside. "Now is time for me to play the hero," Crocodile said mockingly before disappearing, soon reappearing at the top of the building, looking down at the pirates causing havoc on his town. His presence was quickly noticed by everyone around. "Crocodile has arrived. We are saved, please save us, warlord. Kill the SMY pirates once and for all." Crocodile laughed, hearing them cheer on him as the little pirates aimed their guns at him. Crocodile didn't try to move away as they fired their guns, only hitting sand, where the bullet hole should be instead was sand. "If you won't attack, then allow me," Crocodile taunted before raising his hand, swinging it down, shouting, "Sandstorm." A huge sandstorm formed where the pirates were, and people ran away from the storm, shielding their eyes from the increased amount of sand in the air. Soon the storm disappeared, showing the three pirates lying on the ground. Their eyes were no longer in their eye sockets, blood leaking out from almost every part of their bodies. The sand had moved so fast that it had pierced their bodies like a bullet, and the sandstorm had millions of these bullets flying around in a ridiculous speed. The sand had turned red from the blood. Seeing the pirates dead, the people came out from where they were hiding before cheering for Crocodile for saving them from the pirates. The warlord simply smiled slyly, Nico Robin hiding behind a corner with a frown, seeing the ignorant people cheer on someone like Crocodile. Going merry. It had been weeks since they left Drum Island. Luffy, Usopp, and Chopper were busy trying to catch something, but so far, no luck. Luffy's stomach started protesting, telling him to eat meat. The Straw Hat captain was drooling from his mouth, thinking about all the food hidden in the ship by Sanji. "We need meat," Luffy shouted at the sky. The luck seemed to have run out. There was light on the horizon, only a dark abyss. How could he survive like this? Was this truly the end? "Don't worry, Luffy. We will soon reach Sandy Island. Once we get there, you can eat as much as you want." Vivi's voice reached his ears, snapping him out of his stupid thoughts. That seemed to do the trick since he straightened up. Perhaps he just needs to wait. Sooner or later, they would catch something or maybe sneak at Sanji's kitchen at night and eat food. "Sanji, prepare tea for everyone," Nami ordered, standing on the deck, looking at the weather. Perhaps a cup of tea could help her captain. "Of course, Nami Swan," Sanji said with a perverted grin on his face, full pervert mode on, much to Zoro's annoyance, who was busy doing push-ups. As Sanji was preparing the tea, the crew noticed steam coming out of the ocean. Wondering what it was all about, they got a closer look, especially Usopp, who used binoculars. "What's happening?" Chopper asked with a hint of fear in his voice, taking a step back and standing behind Zoro's feet as if it was an indestructible shield. "I have read about this. This is an underwater volcano," Nami informed the crew with a smile. The first time any of them had seen one, Sanji started chatting that Nami was smart. "Underwater volcano? Didn't know there was such a thing?" Usopp commented, not worried since he didn't think it was harmful. "Actually, there are more volcanoes underwater than above water. A few thousand years later, and an island will be born here," Nami said, looking at the ocean around them with amazement. "That would be an amazing sight to see," Chopper commented, not hiding behind Zoro anymore, looking at the approaching steam with awe. Much to Nami's surprise, Luffy was quiet, too quiet. "Luffy, you alright?" she asked, thinking that perhaps something was bothering him. "Ah, everything is alright. You know, my grandpa once told me that this is how the red line was created. He said that it is speculated that a long time ago, underwater volcanoes all around the world suddenly erupted at the same time, eventually creating the red line," Luffy said, in a tone as if he remembered something unpleasant. "That makes sense. That could explain it," Nico remarked, just as the ship was sealing through the steam. The steam temperature was nothing that could bother them, but Luffy heard the voices near them. As they were sailing forward, he noted that two voices were going away while one of them was stuck here. He briefly glanced at his crew, wondering if any of them noticed it, but it seemed they didn't notice shit. Releasing a sigh, the ship came out of the steam. Only then did Usopp notice the man hanging on the fishing tackle. "Well, hello there, friends," the strange man greeted them, causing Usopp and Chopper to scream, taken entirely by surprise. The man was clearly some type of cross-dresser, wearing flamboyant ballet clothes with a swan theme. He was wearing a pink overcoat and blue medieval-like garments, with his shorts appearing almost like a large ball around the man's hips and thighs. He wore heavy makeup, and his exposed legs were rather hairy. Nami had seen all kinds of strange clothes, but this one was at the top. "Where did you come from?" Sanji asked, coming out of the kitchen when he heard the screams. Before the strange man could answer, he was in another ship. "When we were in the steam, he was caught by Usopp's fishing rod. This also means that yet again, you were taken by surprise," Luffy said with an IEND, stretching out his arms much to the horror of his crew, knowing their captain didn't like when they didn't show results in their Haki training. "Who are you?" Nami asked, pointing at the strange man who, after being addressed, he straight up. "Oh, my name is Bon Clay. It is good to meet you all," he said, wanting to kiss Nami's hand, but she pulled her hand away before he could. "Perhaps you should go back to your ship before it gets too far," Usopp suggested, looking at him. Whirling around but more like dancing, he looked at Usopp. "I can't swim. I'm a devil fruit user," he informed him, drawing the attention of everyone. "Which one?" Nico asked curiously, wondering if he perhaps had some kind of powerful devil fruit. Bon Clay smiled before turning at the Straw Hat Boy, extending his arm, touching his face. There were suddenly two Luffy standing there. One was wearing normal clothes and the other with the weird clothes of Bon Clay. "This is my power. I can turn into anyone whose face I touch," he explained, showing a couple of different faces before touching the face of Usopp, Chopper, Zoro, and finally Nami. "Not just my face, but my body changes as well," he revealed with Nami's face before removing his upper clothes. Sanji went flying with a nosebleed, drooling like a dog. "Ah!" Bon screamed in pain when Nami suddenly hit his head with as much armament Haki as she could, causing a big swelling on top of his head. "Don't try that, or I will turn you to ash," Nami screamed with shark teeth and fire in her eyes to Bon, who was crying anime tears. "Man, you guys are brutal," he murmured, holding his head in pain. Luffy laughed at his antics. "You're funny, but don't actually try that again," Luffy said with a cheerful tone, but everyone could pick on the thread of his words. Standing up, he gave him a thumbs up with a wink, his teeth suddenly shining like a star. "You have my word," he promised, just as Nico was about to ask how he would return back to his ship. A new ship returned with 2 people on board. Seeing his ship approaching, Bon jumped on the deck railings, standing only on 1 foot, turning at the Straw Hats. "It was fun. I hope we see each other again," he said before jumping to his ship with the strength of one leg. He was a funny man, Luffy commented, smiling as the other ship sailed away from them. Where were you, Mr. 2? The Straw Hat crew heard as the other ship sailed away, making almost everyone gasp in shock. He was Mr. 2? Usopp screamed in fear, his tongue hanging out of his mouth. Luffy narrowed his eyes at the ship before turning to face his crew with a serious look on his face. You didn't know his face, Vivi? Luffy asked seriously, sounding like a captain. I didn't really know him. All I knew was that he was someone who wears heavy makeup, wears ridiculous clothes, and likes ballet, earning a deadpan look from Zoro, who was checking his swords. That pretty much describes that man, he remarked before turning to look at his captain. He just touched our faces, we should do something about that, he said, knowing the last thing they needed was being in the company of someone acting like someone of their crew. Vivi, who felt stupid for not recognizing him, suddenly looked at Luffy with a pale face. One of the faces he showed was my father's face, she revealed, remembering the familiar face of her father. Zoro frowned, his hand resting against the hilt of his swords. Who knows what he can do with the face of a king? He can easily do something and put all the blame on him, he said grimly, making Vivi turn paler, knowing that was most likely the reason he had that face in the first place. I should get there as soon as possible, Vivi thought, her forehead resting against the railing. She suddenly felt a hand on her shoulder, calming her slightly. Don't worry, Vivi. We will soon end this rebellion. Nothing bad will happen. I will personally punish Crocodile for what he did, Luffy said warmly, trying to reassure her that everything would be alright. Vivi smiled, her hand touching his hand, squeezing it tightly, already feeling better. Thank you, Luffy, she said before wiping away the tears from her face, turning to look at him with a hint of blush on her face, something noticed by Nico and Nami, the latter having a devil's smirk on her face. We will need a way to know who's the real one, Zoro suggested. Soon, it was decided for every member, including Vivi and her duck, to draw an X symbol on their arms before covering them with bandages. 3 days later, for the last 3 days, Luffy had tortured his crew with his so-called training, and it was mainly observation haki. The crew didn't know why he didn't allow them to train their armament haki but didn't question it. With a bat in his hand that no one knew where he got it from, Luffy was walking around his crew, all of them blindfolded, sitting on the main deck, only their observation haki left to save them from getting hit. A swing, Usopp dodged immediately. Luffy smiled. It seemed from everyone in the crew that Usopp had the best observation haki behind him. Another swing, Nami dodged, and so did Sanji, Zoro, and Nico. Vivi and Chopper failed. One thing Luffy had noticed quickly about Nico was her armament haki was already good enough. He figured she could get excellent soon. The only thing left was for her to either eat a devil fruit or choose a weapon. A sword perhaps, or maybe a pipe, or maybe Nami's old staff. Some of you might be curious why we are training observation haki. Luffy started gaining the attention of his crew as he walked around, the bat still in his hand. Mr. 2 has the ability to turn as one of us, but if you have good enough observation haki, then it won't matter. He can change his face all he wants, but his inner voice will never change. Luffy explained, seeing that he had distracted his whole crew with what he said. At that moment he used his speed to hit each one and see if any of them would react in time to dodge, or at least try to dodge. Usopp, Sanji, and Nami almost dodged, but everyone else didn't even see it coming. Zoro, because he was better at armament haki. Holding their heads in pain, only then did Luffy remove their blindfolds, allowing them to stand up. Zoro had an annoyed look on his face, but it was directed at himself rather his captain. We are finished here with the training. Now let's make our way to Crocodile, Luffy shouted, but just as he shouted, sudden waves rocked against the ship, making some stumble back. Everyone turned around to see a sea monster coming out of the water. Usopp and Chopper screamed, hugging each other for dear life while Luffy and Zoro were preparing to eat it. Meat, Luffy shouted, drooling, ready to throw a bolt of lightning at him. Zoro was preparing to slice him to pieces, and Sanji raised his leg. No, you can't hurt him, Vivi screamed at them with a raised fist. The sea monster dove back below the waves. Why not? Luffy asked, with a sad look that he couldn't enjoy a new type of meat. Sea cat is a sacred animal in Alabasta. You can't eat it, she ordered, looking at the three of them down. Of course, Your Majesty, Sanji agreed immediately with hearts while kneeling. It wouldn't hurt to tell us sooner, Zoro grumbled before returning to his training. Luffy heard his stomach demanding more food, his head hanging down against the ship's railing, his eyes briefly glancing at Chopper before looking at Vivi, whose anger disappeared a bit. Don't worry, Luffy, once we reach Alabasta, you can eat as much as you want. The appearance of the sea cat proves that we are close, Vivi said, hoping her words would help. So do these? Nijiko said, pointing towards the horizon. Everyone turned to see what she was pointing at, only to see ships sailing towards Alabasta. All of them were much larger than Going Merry. They're the ships of Baroque works. The agents are gathering, Vivi said with a grimace. They must be the billions, then. They are the officer agents Undi Peak. These guys are elite. This won't be easy, Vivi said, frowning. Can't we just attack them now? They don't know who we are. We can easily launch a surprise attack, but having so many ships against us. Usopp suggested walking over to the cannons of the ships. Well, I can easily deal with them. One simple strike, and I will sink them, Luffy suggested, his hand engulfed in lightning. There's no need, Captain. They're nothing but small fries. We can deal with them later. Right now, let's deal with what we came here to do, Zoro suggested, his hand on the hilt of his special sword. You're right. We eat first, and then we can kick Crocodile's ass, Luffy proclaimed. Nami giggled at his words, trusting someone like Luffy to say that eating food was more important. Sandy Island. A large group of Marines was walking through the small town. One of them was smoking 2 cigarettes. Near him was Tachigi, who noticed the number of people gathered around a restaurant. What's happening there? Smoker questioned his soldier, seeing the people who had gathered from afar, making their way towards the restaurant. Soon, a Marine approached them. Sir, it seems a client had fallen victim of the desert strawberry. He was talking with the chef of the place when he collapsed dead on the spot, and people inside are afraid. The Marine reported, saluting towards the captain. Smoker cocked an eyebrow. Desert strawberry. What is that? He asked his soldier, inhaling his cigarettes. I have read about them apparently in Alabasta. There are these spiders that look like a strawberry, but if you eat them, you will get infected, and within a few days, you will drop dead. Not only that, but the poison spreads around your body, is contagious, it can spread from skin to skin contact. Tashigi explained to her captain, who grumbled, but couldn't help but have a feeling that something was off. It seems ignorance can get you killed in this country, Smoker remarked. Meanwhile, inside the restaurant, every client was looking at the young man with shock and pity. The chef was the only one who wasn't trying to keep his distance like the others. He was a tall, strong young man with black hair that was curled. An orange wide-brimmed hat with 2 charms on the rim was perched atop the mentioned hair. A string of red beads held the 2 charms, one of which had a smiling face and the other a frowning face, to the hat. He sported a blue bag belted around his left leg, black boots, and black knee-length shorts with an eyelet-studded orange belt. Over his right hip, he wore a short second belt with a big red A on the silver buckle. At his left hip, a dagger with a green sheath was hanging. He had an orange elbow guard, a tattoo of the initials, ASCE, on his upper arm, a log pose and a red and white striped bracelet on his left wrist. In order to match the string of beads holding the 2 charms on his hat, he wore a red beaded necklace. 2 long, orange side straps protruded from the hat and came together at a sizable medallion of a bull's skull with orange tassels. The enormous tattoo of a skull with a white mustache and a manji behind it that was visible on his back was another pretty distinctive characteristic. The poor soul, he's still holding the fork, one said with sadness. Man didn't know something could kill you so quickly, someone else commented. Huh? What's happening here? The young man suddenly asked, seeing everyone suddenly freaking out. You're alive, everyone screamed. The young man was still confused before he whipped his face using the dress of one lady nearby. The said lady screamed flustered before running away. Man, it seems I fell asleep, the young man said, earning deadpan looks from everyone. You fell asleep. We were worried for you, everyone screamed except the chef, who chuckled before handing him a glass of water. Seeing the strange people talk like that, the young man turned toward the chef, who handed him a glass of water. You hired them? Are these your actors? The young man asked, pointing at the people behind him, eating meat from his pork. The chef simply shook his head. "No, we are just happy that you didn't die," the chef said. Suddenly, the young man fell flat on the dish again, sleeping. "Wake up, you idiot," everyone screamed, not fooled this time. "So, there you are." A voice spoke as a person walked inside holding some kind of weapon. Ace woke up before turning around to face his guest. "You have got so nerve to show yourself, Portgas D. Ace, the second commander of Whitebeard pirates," Smoker spoke. His fist slowly becoming smoke but not actually attacking. "EHHHHHH." Everyone inside screamed when they heard the identity of the young man, before starting to talk to each other. "I knew I had seen that tattoo before. What should we do?" "We need to leave. These people from Whitebeard pirates are crazy, especially the commanders," one said as everyone slowly left the restaurant, some from the front door, some from the windows. "Ah, who might you be?" The man identified as Ace asked with a smirk, his index finger turned to flame, tipping his hat a little higher. "Captain Smoker, I would ask you to surrender yourself, pirate," Smoker demanded, but knowing the pirate wouldn't do that, he was glad that the civilians had left the area, except for the stupid chef, who for some reason was still hanging around. Ace yawned, not at all impressed. "Not impressed? I was hoping to see someone else, not you," Ace remarked with a snarky smile, remembering Asuka for a moment, but knowing her, she would probably chase him around until she got what he had promised her. "What are you doing at this side of the sea after the little trick you pulled off in Sabaody?" Smoker asked with actual curiosity in his voice, ignoring the pirate's comment about him. Like everyone else, he had read the newspaper, while Smoker held no love for the celestial dragons. He wondered what his problem was with them. Saying that Ace's face actually darkened a bit, the temperature inside the bar increasing by the second. "That's none of your business, Marine Captain. Now, can we just forget about this and go our separate ways?" Ace asked, still sitting on the chair unmoving. "No, can't do. As long as I'm a Marine and you're a pirate, it is my job to put you down," Smoker answered, his whole arm becoming smoke. "You know that's stupid, right? Why can't we just talk this out over a good drink?" Ace asked with a smile. The temperature increasing more, sending a wave of his conqueror's haki around, causing Smoker to stumble back but still keep his composure, preparing to fight. Luffy everyone, especially Luffy, immediately noticed the wave of Conqueror's haki. "He's here?" Luffy suddenly shouted as they were walking around the town, a bright smile on his face. "Who, Luffy?" Nami asked, seeing her lover smiling brightly like this. "My brother," were his last words before disappearing in a flash of lightning. "Luffy has a brother?" Ace, the second commander of the Whitebeard pirates, was looking at Smoker with a calculating look. He had hoped to meet Asuka and Luffy here instead since she was sent here to see what was the deal with Crocodile and Alabasta. From what she told him, apparently the warlord was using the revolution to acquire something. Whatever that was. Ace wasn't interested in any of that. What he was interested were Asuka's words before he closed the call. "I heard you were looking for Blackbeard?" Her voice reached his ears just as he was about to close the call. His eyes suddenly narrowed. Who could have told her? He sure as shit didn't tell her. The only ones who can know are the Whitebeard pirates themselves. So unless his father was in direct contact with Asuka for whatever reason, how could she? Ace asked himself before putting the transponder snail back to his ear. "How do you know that?" he asked slowly with a low dangerous tone. On the other side, he heard her giggle, something he always enjoyed hearing. "Don't forget you still have a grandfather who still loves you," she answered with a cute giggle, something she did only when she was with Ace, never in front of anyone else. Ace rolled his eyes at her playful nature. It annoyed him sometimes, reminding him of his little brother, but that always brought a smile on his face. But he grimaced slightly when she told him that his grandfather loved him. He was the son of Gold D. Roger, how could anyone? "Ace, you there?" Her voice made him escape his dark thoughts. Clearing his throat, he rubbed his nose. "Fine, Asuka, now. Are you saying that Garp knows about me looking for Blackbeard?" he asked curiously, wondering how Garp could know. "Vice Admiral Garp approached me one day, asking about you. At first, I was afraid that he might, you know, but at the end of the discussion, he told me that he was happy that you had taken a liking to me before telling me to keep an eye on you, and your whereabouts. As for your question, I got reports from certain places that you were seen there asking about Blackbeard's location," Asuka explained with a respectful tone on her voice. especially when she mentioned Garp's name. Ace rubbed his forehead with sheer annoyance. He wasn't a child anymore. He knew how to protect himself. He had the Mara no mi fruit. Tell Garp that he doesn't need to watch over my ass. Ace spoke with a hint of annoyance but hated to admit that he liked that Garp still cared for him. Does that mean I can watch over your ass? You know I like to. Anyway, do you have any information on Blackbeard's whereabouts? Ace interrupted her before she got into more details. Ace heard a burst of laughter on the other side of the phone, making him smile. I can tell you, but not here. I'm going to Alabasta to investigate Warlord Crocodile. I will tell you there, Asuka explained, her voice filled with a hint of anger when she mentioned the word, Warlord. Ace raised an eyebrow, not understanding why. Wait, why not tell me right now? Ace asked, sure he was going to the Alabasta anyway to meet with his troublesome little brother. I will tell you there, Isabel said playfully, and Ace was sure he heard a giggle before closing the call, just as Ace was about to say something. Sighing, Ace tipped his head a bit before deciding that perhaps he should find a restaurant to eat something. A few hours later, he found a restaurant. This one will do, he thought before walking inside. Now, Ace was raising the temperature inside the restaurant by the second the chef had crawled away when he felt the added temperature that made him sweat more than the desert outside. He figured his life was more precious than the restaurant. Smoker gritted his teeth. His arms were entirely smoke, his weapon in his right hand. He knew his chances of winning this fight were too low, if not impossible, but he was a Marine first, and as such, it was his duty to fight the evil and bring justice even if it meant death. Ace narrowed his eyes slightly, knowing the captain wasn't going to back down from this fight. He had to give credit to him. He had met many captain and even vice admirals who ran away with their tails between their legs the moment the situation got a bit tough. Come on, can't we solve this issue over a glass of whiskey or beer? Ace asked playfully as his arms turned to fire. The temperature inside now much hotter than outside, so much that the water inside the restaurant was boiling. Smoker felt himself sweating. Despite being a smoke fruit user, he was still sweating. Let's do this, he thought, prepared to make his first move, but just as he was about to make a move, a smug grew on the pirate's face. It seems he's here, he said, the smug not leaving his face. Who the hell are you? He was interrupted by a tap on his shoulder. Smoker dreaded who could be behind him, turning around slowly to see his worst nightmare. The Straw Hat himself smiling like an idiot towards him. Hey, Smokey, he greeted the Marine captain. It took a moment for the captain to actually process that the Straw Hat was right here, just as Smoker was about to attack him. Wind force, Luffy murmured under his breath, shoving his open palm forward, causing Smoker to be sent flying right at Ace, who simply moved out of the way, the Marine's body crushing to several walls, before finally stopping. Evil pirates, he thought, with a big headache. Luffy, Ace, they shouted before hugging each other. Pulling away. Luffy was the first to talk. What are you doing so far from paradise? Luffy asked. He had thought that he would eventually meet Ace when he finally reached paradise, but to meet him on this side of the sea was something he didn't expect. Personal business, Luffy. What about you? Ace asked, rubbing his ear. Just as Luffy was about to ask what sort of business, they both felt Smoker running towards them. Come here, Straw Hat. Smoker demanded loudly just as Luffy and Ace started running away from the restaurant, soon followed by a whole group of Marines. Find your crew, Luffy. I will deal with them, Ace said to Luffy. The storm user nodded before running away. The others, including Smoker, were about to chase him when a ring of red fire was spread around them, trapping them in. The figure of Ace slowly formed in front of them, fire coming out from several of his areas with a smirk. Hate to stop you guys, but can't allow you to go forward, Ace said with a serious tone that made many Marines step back in fear, except Smoker, who stood in front of his soldiers, Tashigi standing beside him with a sword on her hand, not backing away. Any other time he would have praised her for her braveness, but this was too dangerous. Everyone stand behind me, Smoker ordered his man, his eyes focused on the pirate in front of him, who, despite being a pirate, didn't have the malice-looking eyes he had seen so many times before that he had lost count. Why are you trying to protect Straw Hat, Luffy? Smoker asked, pointing his weapon at the pirate. Well, every big brother must protect their little siblings whenever they are in trouble, Ace spoke, taking everyone by surprise. Wait, little sibling, Straw Hat Luffy is your brother, Smoker asked. But more like a statement, the fire fruit user simply smirked, not saying anything. Luffy the crew was waiting for their captain and suddenly saw their captain landing on the ship in a bolt of lightning. "Everyone, we are leaving right now," he ordered with a serious tone. Everyone jerked up at his tone, instantly doing their job to sail away. "Luffy, what happened to your brother? Where is he?" Nami asked, checking the waves and the direction. "He's close, he just stopped to say hi to Smoker. He will be here soon," Luffy said, not worried for his brother. "Luffy, we didn't know you have a brother?" Usopp asked, genuinely surprised. He wondered what this big brother was like. "I actually have 2 big brothers," he said with a smirk, raising 2 fingers from his hand. "Two?" the crew shouted, except Zoro and Sanji, whose only reaction to a raised eyebrow. "So, who are these brothers of yours?" Vivi asked, with a cup of cold tea in her hand. "Well, there's Sabo, he works in the Revolutionary Army. He's a logia user just like me. Last I heard, he's the second commander," Luffy answered casually. "Revolutionary Army?" Vivi almost shouted. She had, of course, heard of them, the group that was formed to free the world from the tyranny of the world's nobles. She briefly wondered if they targeted her kingdom, mainly her father. She didn't know much about the celestial dragons, but she once heard from his father that they were rotten to their core. Vivi noticed that her captain said that Sabo worked as the second commander. "Wait, does that mean?" Vivi thought of perhaps asking, but before she could. Luffy nodded without a care, as if what he said wasn't a big deal. "Luffy, what about your other brother?" Nico asked, handing a cup of cold tea to everyone that Sanji had prepared. "He's the second commander of the Whitebeard pirates," Luffy said with a little shrug of his shoulder, while almost everyone gasped in shock. "Geez, how is it possible that you know so many powerful people?" Usopp asked what probably everyone was thinking right now before raising his hand and counting the number of powerful people that Luffy knew. The Straw Hat captain simply shrugged his shoulders. It wasn't really a big deal. "How strong are your brothers, Luffy?" Nami asked, handing a cup of cold tea. Despite not being bothered by the heat, he still appreciated the tea, his arm moving around her waist, bringing her closer to him, before kissing her cheek, making her giggle. "Me, Ace, and Sabo trained since childhood, but because I got the devil fruit much earlier, I was always stronger than them," he stated, just as a flame appeared behind him. "How about we test that now?" Ace asked behind Luffy, who turned around with a broad smile. "Ace," he shouted, shaking his hand with his brother. The others eyed him up and down. Despite his casual appearance, they could tell he was powerful. "Good to see you, Luffy," Ace said. Now they could actually greet each other. Luffy stepped away before introducing his crew to Ace. "Everyone, this is my brother Ace. Ace, this is my crew. Zoro is the swordsman. Nami is the navigator. Usopp is the gunman. Sanji is the chef. Nico is a medic and a fighter, and Chopper is the ship's doctor," Luffy said with everyone else greeting Ace. "Quite a crew you got here," Ace said before turning to the crew. "I hope my brother isn't giving you all troubles. He can be quite a handful," Ace said in a joking manner, much to Luffy's embarrassment. The others shook their heads. While Luffy could actually sometimes bring trouble, he was the captain they choose to follow with their life. "Ace, what is this tattoo on your arm?" Luffy asked, only now noticing the tattoo across his arm. Ace gave him a devil smirk that the Straw Hat boy really didn't like. He suddenly felt a chill on his spine, causing him to wince. "I made a tattoo of the first letter of our names, A for Ace, S for Sabo," he explained, pointing at each letter on his arm. "Where's mine?" Luffy asked. He figured the letter E must be for Edward Newgate. He knew from Ace's letters that Whitebeard was like a father to him. "C is you, Luffy," Ace added, his smirk growing with each passing second. "C? Why C?" Nami asked with a pointed look. "C is for his old nickname, Crybaby," he said with a burst of loud laughter, much to Luffy's annoyance and the crew's amusement. "Crybaby," Zoro murmured in amusement. He could hardly see his captain as someone who cried a lot. Seeing Ace acting like this with his captain, Sanji suddenly got a flash of a young blonde boy getting kicked by 3 older boys, calling him a failure. Is this what a brother is like? He asked himself with a melancholy look on his face that he quickly changed to a smiling one. That was a long time ago, and he would never see them again. "I didn't cry that much," Luffy protested with a pout. Only every time we trained with Garp, which happened almost every day, he added, still laughing, before looking at Luffy again. So, want to join the Whitebeard pirates? Your friends can come as well? Ace asked, despite knowing the answer. No, thank you. Luffy quickly declined his invitation. Figures as much. Tell me, Luffy, what are you all doing here? Ace asked. Sure, he knew his little brother could be here just to explore a new place. But the timing was a bit suspicious, especially with the growing revolt. Luffy gave him a quick recap of what happened after he passed the Grand Line. When he told him that they had a princess on board, he quickly turned to get a look at the princess in question. She was beautiful, blue-haired, but still not like Asuka. Bowing his head respectfully. Princess, I hope my brother is not giving you trouble, he said, kissing her hand, much to her embarrassment. No, not at all. Your brother is a good man and captain, she said sincerely with a flush on her cheeks. Something Ace noticed, making him smirk. It seemed his brother was more than just a good man and a good captain. Ace, how about you stay with us for a little? We can prepare a feast for you, Luffy suggested with a broad smile. Hoping to spend some time with him, Ace was about to refuse the offer, but knowing Asuka, she was probably at the next destination. Very well, Luffy, Ace reluctantly agreed, much to Luffy's delight. Sanji, prepare double the food, and don't forget the beer, Luffy ordered, turning to his chef, who nodded before walking inside. Secretly hoping that Ace wasn't a black hole when it came to eating food, but knowing they were brothers, that was just wishful thinking. Zoro raised an eyebrow when he heard Luffy ordering beer for Ace, wondering if he would be able to beat him in a drinking match. Night, for Ace, Luffy shouted, with a glass full of beer in his hand, raising it up. For Ace, the rest of the crew shouted. Usually, Luffy wasn't someone who drank, but on special occasions, he drank a bit. So Ace, tell me, how did you end up becoming the second commander of the Whitebeard pirates? Luffy asked. Many leaned a bit closer, eager to know how Ace could get in contact with the most powerful men in the world and survive to tell the tale. Believe it or not, at first, I was there to take his head, Ace said, making everyone look at him as if he was crazy, except Luffy, who face-palmed. He should have seen it coming. How the hell are you still alive? Usopp shouted. Facing someone like Whitebeard was a death sentence. Rubbing his neck in embarrassment, having so many eyes on him. Well, I wanted to leave my mark on the world and figured killing one of the emperors would be a good start. At first, I targeted Kaido, but in the end, I didn't even face him, Ace stated. Many in Luffy's group now fully convinced that Ace had a death wish. Still, Luffy knew there was something Ace didn't tell them when it came to facing Kaido. After that, I went to Fishman Island, since it is one of the islands under Whitebeard's territory. And faced Jinbei, Ace said, almost instantly noticing the frown and angry looks from many of Luffy's crew, especially the one with orange hair. Her eyes turned cold like ice, making Ace wonder what kind of dispute did Luffy's crew have with Jinbei. Giving his brother a brief glance, his face was neutral unlike the others. But Ace could tell Luffy was angry. He decided to ask his little brother later. We fought for 7 days and 7 nights. At the last day, Whitebeard arrived. Back then, I thought that would be it. Either I would win or die. I used everything I had. But Whitebeard still beat me when I thought he would kill me. Instead he invited me to his crew as one of his sons, Ace explained with a smile. Not bothering telling them how many times he tried to kill his father while in the ship, each time ending up with a broken nose. Wow, you're quite brave, Usopp commented, many nodding in agreement except Zoro and Luffy, the latter thinking his brother was too reckless. ESPNG as stupid as trying to kill Kaido and Whitebeard. The rest of the night went smoothly, Ace telling stories as a pirate of Whitebeard, then Luffy started telling his own stories about how he found his crew. During the story, Ace noticed the little looks of the navigator, Nijiko, and the princess were giving Luffy. Well, look who's been busy when I wasn't around. I can't wait to tease him, Ace thought with a smirk on his face. How about a beer challenge? Zoro suddenly suggested looking at his captain's brother, who arched an eyebrow in confusion. Beer challenge? He asked, amused, wondering what kind of challenge this was. Each of us has brought a barrel full of beer. The first to finish or the one that lasts the longest wins. Nami explained the rules, excited to start. Understanding the simple rules, he decided to agree. Oh, well, let's do this, Ace agreed. with Luffy and Sanji bringing 3 barrels and filling up their glasses. 3, 2, 1, Zoro ended the countdown. Soon, the 3 were drinking, Luffy cheering for Nami, much to Ace's amusement. "You can win, Nami," Luffy cheered, followed by the rest, especially Sanji, who was the loudest out of all of them, Chopper and Usopp cheering for Zoro. "Stupid witch," Zoro murmured in annoyance when he saw Nami already filling up her 3rd glass while he was still in his 2nd. "Damn, she's hardcore," Ace commented, actually surprised to see Luffy's girl drinking so fast. After 30 minutes of drinking and stopping a fight between Zoro and Sanji, Nami slammed her hand down on top of her barrel. "I win," she exclaimed, happy to get 10,000 berries from Zoro, who was already done drinking, not finishing the whole barrel. Now that the challenge had ended, Luffy decided to ask Ace something he had been wondering about since the beginning. "Ace, earlier you said you were hunting someone. Who is he?" Luffy suddenly asked. Ace's smile suddenly disappeared like a candle flame, his face darkened, and everyone felt the temperature rising slowly until Luffy put his hand on Ace's shoulder, stopping him from making his crew uncomfortable. "His name is Marshall D. Teach, he goes by Blackbeard now. He did the ultimate sin of every pirate crew. He killed a fellow crewmate," Ace said darkly. For a moment, his fingertips turned to blue flames but soon turned to normal, knowing it would be uncomfortable to do this amongst his brother's crew. Luffy understood that, and so did everyone. Zoro frowned at the coward. Sanji's only reaction was to light a cigarette slowly. "Why?" Luffy asked his brother, who explained that he did it for a devil fruit. Ace didn't know why that fruit was so important to Teach, but that didn't matter. He would make him pay one way or another. Soon the party ended, and the only ones left awake were Luffy and Ace, standing on the main deck. "Quite a crew you got here," Ace commented, turning his hand of flame to brighten the night. Luffy nodded his head, on his hands a bone with meat, his eyes looking forward. Knowing they were alone, Ace decided to ask what was going through his head. "By the way, I saw the way that Navigator and the 2 blue-haired girls were looking at you." He teased him with a smirk, nudging his brother slightly. Luffy chuckled, his mouth full of meat. "Nami and Nijiko are my lovers, as for Vivi, I'm not sure," Luffy explained, smiling. Sure you liked Vivi, but he knew her mind was already full with saving her country. "Well, look who became a man when I wasn't around," Ace cheered, putting his arm around his neck, pulling him closer. "I'm so happy, my little brother has become a man," he cheered, wiping away fake tears from his eyes, much to Luffy's embarrassment. "Hey, stop picking on me. What about you? You're the only one out of 3 of us still single?" Luffy asked teasingly, knowing Sabo was dating someone named Koala. He didn't know who she was, but apparently, she was his comrade. Ace looked offended for a moment, his hand over his heart in a dramatic fashion, before smirking. "Actually, I'm not single anymore. I know a girl I like. She's a Marine captain," Ace stated, knowing how his brother would react, how everyone would react. Luffy started coughing roughly, swallowing the meat before looking at Ace as if he was crazy. "A Marine captain? How the hell did that happen?" Luffy asked, but more like shouting at him. To Luffy, this was like straight out of a boring romance novel that Makino used to read to them when they were a little younger. Ace laughed at his reaction. He couldn't wait to see Sabo's reaction. "Well, she was actually chasing me, trying to capture me. At first it was nothing, but from the beginning, I quite liked her fierce personality. We went back and forth, fighting, and talking during the fighting. At the 3rd fight, I started using my amazing flirting techniques, slowly working. That was until one day, an enemy pirate crew went after me," Ace said with a grimace. "Why? I killed their captain a while back. The fool attacked me for my bounty, and his crew was hunting me down, trying to kill me. Me and Asuka were fighting again. I got careless. I usually stay in the same place only for a short time, but because I enjoyed our fight, I ended up staying there for a whole month," he explained, his body getting hotter, flames spreading out from his arm. "What happened next? Well, 3 soldiers of Asuka were killed by the pirate crew due to them trying to arrest them. Asuka was devastated and launched an attack on them. I was there and fought alongside her, even saving several of her soldiers. By the end, the strongest of the other crew tried to attack me from behind, but Asuka simply used her sword and her devil fruit to kill him. After that day, we decided to talk again, I called her every now and then. After 2 years since we first meet, she congratulated me for becoming the second commander of Whitebeard pirates. We secretly meet after a month. That day Ace trailed off, already making it clear what happened next. With a little blush on his face, remembering the night, suddenly Luffy slapped his shoulder. Congratulations, I honestly thought you would be single your whole life, he teased, making Ace groan, grabbing his head with his arm, and rubbing his hair. Look, who's talking? Someone who cried when the doctor explained how, that's not talk about it. Luffy silenced him, muffling his laughter with his hand. Soon, the laughter ended. Luffy, when I mentioned that I fought against Jinbei, your crew got angry. Why is that? Ace asked slowly, knowing this could be a sour subject, wondering if, for some reason, his brother was after him. He knew Jinbei, and he was a good fishman. Luffy sighed before explaining the whole deal with Arlong, how he had tortured Nami and enslaved her village. Ace's face changed, his eyes narrowing. He hadn't expected Jinbei to be so careless. I can talk to him if you want, he offered, but Luffy shook his head. No, this is Nami's business. She will be the one to decide it, he explained with a neutral tone. Ace nodded in understanding, hoping his navigator wouldn't try to kill Jinbei. Silence took over them. Only the sound of waves rocking against the ship was heard. Ace looked on the horizon, knowing it was his time to leave. Turning to Luffy, he grabbed something from his pocket, handing it to Luffy. Huh? A paper? Luffy questioned Ace after he handed what looked like a blank sheet of paper. Not just any letter. This is a vivre card, Ace explained. It will direct you to my location, no matter where you are, ensuring that we will meet again. Luffy placed it on his palm, and much to his surprise, it started slowly inching towards Ace despite the gentle wind, which was going in the opposite direction. Take care of yourself, little brother, Ace said before jumping from the deck on his little boat. It had a weird engine. You're leaving? Luffy asked, his mood dropping. Stay at least one more night. Sorry, Luffy, but I have to find Blackbeard. Once I deal with him, all three of us can meet together when we were young, Ace suggested, making Luffy smile. You're right, that would be amazing, Luffy shouted as Ace used his devil fruit to make his boat sail forward. Good luck, Luffy, Ace shouted, waving at Luffy. Good luck, Ace, Luffy shouted back, waving and holding his vivre card in his right hand. Can't wait for the three of us to meet again, Luffy thought, smiling like a boy full of joy, Whitebeard. The one man who was considered the strongest man in the world, the strongest Yonko, even compared to the likes of Kaido, Shanks, and Big Mom. Sitting in a big chair, he frowned slightly, in his hands was a newspaper. It had been months since the death of his son, Thach. He remembered that day all too well, not the first time he had lost a son, but still every loss hurt him a lot. When his body was found the following morning with several stab wounds on the back, his right hand still opened in a way, indicating that he had been holding something before his death. The moment his body was found, everyone on the ship had been on high alert. It didn't take long to realize that Marshal D. Teach was missing. Connecting the dots, they figured he killed Thach for the devil fruit he found yesterday. Whitebeard grunted as he remembered a little boy hugging his legs, begging him to take him to his crew, to accept him as one of his sons. Whitebeard always thought of himself as someone who could see the darkness in someone's eyes. He hadn't been a pirate for so many years and learned nothing about the greed people had, the greed for power. Yet, despite having Teach in his crew for so many years, not once had he seen anything to indicate that he was hiding something, nothing whatsoever. Either Teach was someone who knew how to hide his true intentions, or I have just ignored it, Whitebeard thought with a painful look on his face. If only he had been more cautious, but he shouldn't dwell on what ifs, not anymore. He had learned that lesson a long time ago. Whitebeard wondered whether Teach always had some kind of plan like this or if he saw the fruit and took the opportunity it presented. Unfortunately, the old Yonko had no idea which fruit was but figured it must be a powerful one. At the top of his head, he could think of a few that were extremely powerful and dangerous, well powerful enough for Teach to go so far as killing a brother to get it. My fruit is one of them, Kaido's fruit, Big Mom's fruit, Arashi no Mi fruit currently in possession of Ace's brother, Yasihi no Mi, Op no Mi, Whitebeard thought with a frown on his face. Whitebeard read every newspaper in hopes of hearing anything new about Ace. A month ago, He had opened his newspaper only to read that Ace had caused great havoc in Sabah archipelago. The newspaper didn't go into much details about what had happened, only that Portgas Ace was responsible for the death of innocent people, his new wanted poster, but nothing else. Whitebeard had immediately called his son, demanding to know what had happened. They were going to sell her. I don't care if a celestial dragon is my enemy or the devil himself. If anyone touches her, I will burn anyone to ash until nothing is left of them. Ace spoke furiously, his eyes ablaze. It took all for Ace not to shout, but he was talking to his father, so he restrained himself. Whitebeard understood his son was angry, and couldn't really blame him. The celestial dragons were the filth of this world. But he needed to realize that being against them was an excellent way to get killed. Calm down, my son. I understand that you're angry but have a clear mind, Whitebeard spoke with a warm tone. He heard as Ace's breathing got calmer, his face not red anymore. Now, what about the innocent people? What happened there? Whitebeard questioned. The door of his room opened, revealing Marco, who was listening closely. I don't know what happened. I didn't harm anyone. I wasn't trying to harm anyone other than the celestial dragon, Ace explained, his voice cracking. Whitebeard thought deeply now. Whatever or not Ace was actually responsible for their deaths, he highly doubted it. Or maybe he got so angry that he used a bit too much power in the wrong place at the wrong time, he thought with a grimace. Taking a deep breath, Whitebeard asked his son who the celestial dragon was trying to harm. After asking that question, his son was dead quiet for a whole minute. Her name is Asuka. She's a marine captain that I have been dating for quite a while now, Ace explained with an almost shy tone and a big blush on his face. His words were met with absolute silence. Hearing nothing, Ace called, "Father, you there?" Knowing they were most likely fine, he didn't get worried. Whitebeard's eyes widened like plates. Marco was eating pineapple when he heard what Ace said, causing him to spit it out before coughing roughly, taking almost a minute to finally calm down before both of them asked the same question. How the hell did that happen? They shouted, causing Ace to wince at the sudden loud noise reaching his ears. Geez, be quieter. Haven't you heard of normal talk? Ace said in annoyance, rubbing his ears. Why do you never say anything about her? Since when? Whitebeard asked with the same loud tone, completely ignoring what Ace said to him. Years, I think almost 2 years now, and I didn't really want anyone to know since she's a marine captain. And I'm a pirate, Ace explained with a downcast look. Don't worry about that, Ace. There's nothing wrong with you. Any girl would be lucky to have you, Whitebeard said with a growing smirk on his face that Ace did not like at all. Sue, when can I meet her? I want to meet my future daughter-in-law, Whitebeard asked with a teasing tone. Ace rolled his eyes. He regretted telling him the half-truth of what happened in Sabah archipelago. Perhaps he should have kept quiet. At that moment, Marco decided to join in the teasing. Me too, Ace. I would like to know just what exactly she saw in you because I don't really see much beyond a spoiled brat, Marco teased with a chuckle. Ace groaned. Shut up, Marco. She doesn't need to meet a stupid chicken like you, Ace retorted. Now, Whitebeard slowly started reading. What he read was the usual, Alabasta in Civil War, several rookies popping out, like the Kid Law, Kid, and Ace's brother. Finding it a bit boring, he decided to read the next page, only for him to gasp at the title. Well, who would have thought something like this could happen? If he's the same as I remember, Kaido will be pissed, Whitebeard thought with a smirk. This could be quite entertaining. Monkey D. Luffy after sailing for several days, they stopped the ship where Vivi told them to, from there only on foot. Trust me, we will soon reach Yuba, Vivi said, trying to ease the tension. She knew walking through the desert wasn't exactly the best activity, but they were simply out of options. Suddenly Luffy pointed a finger forward. What is this place? Everyone turned to see what he was pointing at, only to see a city buried in sand. It looked more like a ghost town rather than a city people would live in. Almost every building was destroyed. Rubble everywhere of what once was a city full of people. Now only a shadow of what once was. The sand had already buried half of the city. That's not Yabu. This is Aramalu, or was before, Vivi said, her mood going south. In front of her, a city that she had visited a couple of times. She remembered the way people used to walk through the market. Children playing in the fountain which was located in the center of the city. The fountain was a statue of a child standing at the top of sea waves. water pouring out of his mouth to the waves below. Nothing left, only a small glimpse of the head sticking out of the sand, the rest buried deep below. Another place, ruined because of him, she murmured, clenching her teeth. A gust of wind flew by, and everyone shielded their faces from the wind except Luffy, who noticed several skeletons being revealed by the wind. Who knew how many more were buried deep in the sand? Which city was this? Luffy questioned as they walked through the center of the dead city. Aramalu, the green town, Vivi said, a skull in front of her, right below a hanging rope. She crouched, grabbing the skull in her hands. The skull was small. Doesn't look green to me, Luffy commented, looking around the town, several buildings still sticking out of the sand. Uso drawing the attention of everyone else. What is that? Pointing at a strange animal that leapt out of the water, it looked like a muscular seal. That's a kung fu dugong, Vivi said, surprised to see one. She had heard of them and read but never saw one with her eyes. She soon noticed Usopp trying to get closer to them. They're dangerous, she shouted quickly, knowing her crewmate couldn't defend himself against one of them, causing Usopp to stumble back when he heard they were dangerous. Why? Usopp asked. The seal didn't look dangerous to him. Perhaps he had poisonous teeth. Looking back at Vivi, who turned fully to him, not noticing that Luffy and Chopper were making their way over to it. They know how to fight, but it is their code to follow whoever beats them, Vivi explained, crossing her arms. Didn't know animals could understand us, Nijiko commented. Meanwhile, Nami was the only one who noticed what Luffy was doing. Vivi, do all of them follow that rule or just one of them? Nami questioned while pointing a finger at Luffy and Chopper. Vivi raised an eyebrow in confusion. Why are you asking? She asked, turning to look at Luffy, only for her to gasp. In front of Luffy and Chopper were what looked like a small army of them following Luffy's strange fighting pose. You hit like this. Luffy demonstrated a move. His new apprentices did the same thing he did, much to the shock of the whole crew. What are you doing, Luffy? Vivi shouted with shark teeth towards her captain, who laughed carelessly. They're better at following my training than you guys, he japed, still laughing, earning an eye roll from his crew. How did you talk with them? Nami questioned her lover, walking up to him. The latter simply pointed a finger at Chopper. I can understand animals. I used to be one, so I can understand and talk with them, the reindeer explained. Nami tilted her head to the side, not knowing it before. That actually could come in handy later. Luffy, what will you do with them? Vivi asked, knowing they couldn't take an army of kung fu dugong with them. Luffy scratched the top of his forehead before punching his palm with a bright smile. Chopper, tell them to find as much water as possible, Luffy commanded, knowing they needed water for their long journey. The doctor nodded before communicating the same thing to them. The new Luffy's apprentices followed the order immediately. Later the crew was making their way towards Yuba. A few days had passed since Ace left, and their feet were slowly burning hot from the sand. Everyone was wearing clothes that covered pretty much their entire bodies, with big hoodies to avoid the sun and cause dizziness. Before reaching the place, Sanji had given all the girls clothes that showed way too much skin, while none of them had that much against it until Vivi brought it up that the sun would burn their skin if they didn't cover themselves. Much to Sanji's despair, Nami and Nijiko agreed before wearing different clothes that would protect their skin. Luffy was walking in front of the crew, with Vivi nearby. Zoro was walking close by, but Chopper was with him, making sure that he wouldn't suddenly decide to go to a completely different direction, again. So Chopper was acting as a compass to Zoro, much to his annoyance, especially when Chopper would start yelling at him to stop changing direction for no reason. Sanji grumbled, telling Chopper not to try that hard, almost causing a small fight between the two. So, we should just go there and stop the rebellion? Luffy asked, trying to make sure he knew what the plan was. While he wasn't someone to follow plans, actually he hated them more than anything, but this time it was different. This was Vivi's country, and he would make sure for now to follow her lead, unless absolutely necessary for the safety of the crew. Well, yes, but we also need to stop them peacefully. Once we reach Yuba, we should be able to stop them, Vivi corrected. The last thing she wanted was to start a war with them. This gave the crew a little pause, especially Luffy and Zoro, who grimaced at her words. Hate to say it, but the rebellion has over 700,000 people, not to mention the many soldiers that switched sides and joined them. How exactly do you expect us to stop them? Luffy questioned, his voice low and calm, yet the straw hat shadowed his eyes. Vivi turned to him with resolve, her eyes ablaze. Once we show them the truth, they will understand and stop the rebellion, she countered loudly, not wanting more innocent blood to spill. Luffy frowned slightly at her words. Of course, what she said made sense to a certain degree. No one with a good head on their shoulder wants to kill innocent people. But that was easier said than done, especially with people who want nothing but blood. There might be people there willing to listen, but the majority probably won't care to listen to reason. Vivi, Nami said with sadness. Knowing what it was like to be in her shoes, she had experienced something similar with Arlong for 10 years, and she wanted to help as much as possible. Vivi, what you're saying is admirable, but you need to understand that they might decide not to listen, despite what you might say, Luffy warned her, his voice soft, putting a hand on her shoulder. Vivi's eyes widened slightly in horror. She knew Luffy had a point, but she just wanted all the suffering to end. Tell me, Vivi, how did this whole ordeal start? Luffy suddenly asked. They were still making their way towards Yuba. While they knew Alabasta was in crisis, and that was because of Crocodile, they still needed information on how everything started. Have you ever heard of dance powder? Vivi questioned with a downcast look, biting her lip in the process, almost drawing blood. Dance powder? No, what is that? Luffy questioned. He had never heard of this term before but figured it must be something terrible. Dance powder is a substance that can summon rain, Nami answered her captain, who tilted his head to the side. Wow, Chopper thought out loud, amazed something like that could exist. A scientist developed it in a place that never rained. Once you burn, it rises to the sky, forming ice in the clouds, eventually falling as rain, she explained. From what Luffy heard, it sounded like a miraculous powder that could fix too many problems, yet, it sounded too good to be true. There must be some bad side effect from this, Sanji asked, but more like a statement. He had read about all kinds of strange things when he was young and had a lot of free time. One of them was this. Nami nodded her head sadly. Yes, when it was first discovered, people around the world were rejoiced, but the problem with this powder is that it causes every surrounding area to suffer from droughts. In a way, it steals the rain, Nami explained with a downcast look. Luffy, who was hearing it, had a few ideas on where this was leading up. Soon after the side effect was known almost everywhere, the government banned the usage of this powder, Vivi added before looking away in the direction where Yuba was. 3 years ago, the rain stopped falling around Alabasta except in the capital. The doubts started forming in people's minds, but many still sided with my father. Until dance powder was found in the capital, people were enraged, and the rebellion soon started, Vivi explained with anger rising in her voice. Each word made her feel worse, closing her hands so hard that it turned her knuckles white, clenching her teeth. He deserves to pay for what he has done, everything because of him, she shouted at the endless desert, her eyes welling up with tears, but she refused to cry. The tears wouldn't help her. Luffy put a hand on her shoulder, hoping to ease her pain. Is okay, Vivi. I will stop him before the things get worse, he promised with a soft tone. The princess buried her face in his chest, grabbing his red shirt tightly, wetting it with her tears. Thank you, Luffy, she said with happiness, her voice muffled by the shirt, and noticed by Nami, who had a devil smirk on her face, while Sanji inhaled on his cigarette so much that it instantly turned to ash, much to Zoro's amusement, who was chuckling. Later, are we there yet? No, are we there yet? No, are we there yet? No, are we there? No, everyone shouted this time at Usopp, who stumbled back when everyone screamed at him to shut up. Hey, don't shout at me. Are we at least close? Usopp defended himself, standing up, shaking his body, desperately trying to shake off the sand from his clothes, especially from his hair. I hate sand. It gets everywhere, Zoro cried out, only now noticing that somehow some sand was inside the scabbards of his swords, much to his irritation. After an hour of walking towards Yuba on foot, each one holding a big bottle of water on their backs, except the woman, since Sanji decided to be a gentleman, and help them with their weight. Just how tall these dunes could get? Usopp asked out loud. His throat was so dry that he felt that instead of his tongue, he had a brick, his tongue sticking out like a dog. Chopper wasn't doing well either, feeling like he would fall dead any second. Ijiko was simply walking without showing signs of being tired, not even sweating, much to the confusion of Chopper. The tallest one is at least 300 meters tall, Vivi said, knowing that wasn't exactly uplifting. 300 meters tall. That might as well be a fucking mountain, Usopp shouted, suddenly standing up again. No wonder it was taking so long to reach the city. With these dunes everywhere, he wondered if they would even reach it. Don't complain. It is just a minor inconvenience, Zoro retorted with annoyance seeping into his tone. While he couldn't say that he enjoyed the desert, it didn't fix anything by complaining. Usopp was ready to start arguing with Zoro while Nami was paying attention to Luffy, who was looking up, whispering words she couldn't hear. Luffy, everything alright? Nami asked, concerned, but her captain didn't answer. Instead, he kept whispering something. She was about to ask him again when a clap of thunder was heard from afar. This caused everyone to pause and look in the direction of the thunder. Everyone's eyes widened, especially Vivi's, who couldn't believe what she was seeing, except Luffy, who smirked slightly. Clouds and more clouds formed around them out of nowhere, hiding the sun, making the heat suddenly much bearable. Usopp fell on his knees, his hands on the sand, sighing in relief. Not having the sun scorching them anymore was much better, but then they all felt something wet falling on their heads. Vivi slowly touched her forehead, not believing what just happened. Touching it, it was definitely wet, when more fell, more and more, until it was raining. This is amazing, Vivi shouted, running around with her arms spread wide. Not caring that her clothes were getting wet. She felt as if a miracle had happened. Jumping on the sand, she looked up at the clouds. Rain not stopping, opening her mouth, she felt her mouth filling with water, swallowing it, the rain washing away the dirt from her face. She jumped in ecstasy. You did this, didn't you, Luffy? Nami suddenly pointed it out, looking at Luffy, who had a broad smile on his face, scratching the back of his head. Ah, it was nothing, he said, slightly embarrassed. His crew smiled in appreciation, even Sanji, despite not liking how Princess Vivi was looking at his captain. He's so damn lucky, he thought with despair and dark clouds above his head. Running to him, she jumped into his arms. Vivi hugged Luffy tightly before kissing his cheek. Thank you, she whispered, saying the word repeatedly, closing her eyes as it kept raining. The others were again reminded why they followed their captain, especially Zoro, Nami, and Sanji. Someone like Luffy who did everything to help the people he loved or called friends. Soon, they started walking again towards Yuba City, now much easier to walk, but Luffy warned them he could keep this up only for an hour before he got exhausted. Eventually, the clouds disappeared, but no one was bothered by it since it was dusk and day would end soon. Alright, we can rest here for now. We should be able to reach Yuba very soon, Vivi said, with a constant smile on her face. Almost instantly, each of the Straw Hats was already sleeping, except Luffy and Nami. Holding her close to his chest, the navigator kissed his lips, a finger softly touching his muscular chest that she loved to touch. Nami, Luffy whispered her name with a deep voice that sent shivers to her core. Only his voice was enough to make her horny. I want to reward you properly, Nami said with a low husky tone that Luffy enjoyed, her hand reaching the desired location. Let's go away for a bit to that small tree. I want to show you something, she whispered just behind his ear before grabbing his crotch with her hand. Nami? Luffy moaned as Nami stroked his cock through his pants. They were staying under a very large tree, and the lack of full moon and tree hiding them making it perfect for her and Luffy. Pulling out the reward, Luffy felt a chill when the night's cold wind hit his naked penis. Her bright brown eyes twinkled mischievously, and her cute pink tongue slipped out to wet her lips. Luffy immediately stopped stroking his. He might accidentally come from just looking at the gorgeous navigator. Walking toward her, Nami's eyes followed the bounce of his cock with each step he took until he was standing right in front of her. The navigator even crossed her eyes to keep it in focus then. Luffy cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing her chin. She parted her mouth instinctually, and her gaze tore away from his cock to look him straight in his eyes. Tell me what you really want, and I'll pound your throat just the way you like. She shivered at his words, and when she swallowed, Luffy could tell how wet her throat was from the messy sound alone. I want to sue. Luffy slipped his hand up to her neck, squeezing it lightly and cutting her off. Nami let out a sharp gasp, and her thigh quivered a bit from the rough action. Luffy began rutting his cock against her pretty face. Her tongue came out instantly to greet his thick shaft, giving it kittenish licks as Luffy haphazardly ran his cock all over her face. "That's a good girl. I'm going to destroy your throat for you. That's what you want, yeah." Nami let out a choked whimper. An unintentionally SXY sound made Luffy's cock throb. He let go of her neck and gripped the base of his cock, slapping her lips a few times with the head. Nami opened her mouth wide, her warm breath tickling his cockhead before he rammed it deep down her sloppy throat. This was nothing new to the couple. Nami loved sucking his cock. Luffy fit his thick, fat cock all the way to the back with only a little effort. With his pubic bone pressing against Nami's plump lower lip, blanching it white, Luffy couldn't even see her face over his groin. Instead, he took in the erection-inducing sight of her milky throat bulging from stretching around his cock. Luffy hissed in approval, "Fucking hell, Nami, you should see yourself. See how you take my cock so good down your throat. I could come just from looking at you like this." She moaned loudly against his cock, and Luffy knew he needed to start moving before he spilled his seed from her simply vibrating around him. Luffy pulled his cock back, watching her, the bulge disappear inch by inch. Her stubborn lips clung tightly to the head of his cock, not allowing it to completely exit her mouth. Luffy let out a chuckle, deciding not to force it out. He leaned forward, wrapping his hands around her petite ankles. He used the position for leverage before he began ramming his cock down her gullet. The cacophony of sounds emerging from Nami would make their way into Luffy's dreams, so fucking disgusting and sloppy they were. Gushing saliva, grunts of exertion, harsh gags from his cock going so deep, and choking from everything being too much, it was intoxicating. "Fuck, Nami, your mouth is just amazing," Luffy growled as he continued to breed her throat, his balls slapping roughly against her nose. Nami had iron lungs, and she continued to gargle and spit around his cock. He could feel the mixture of his pre and her saliva soaking and dripping down his groin, inevitably staining her cover model face. What a sight she would make when he finally pulled off her. But first, he would make her come. Her blue panties were already soaked through, and Luffy smelled her need before he even let go of her ankle to hook her panties to the side, the sharp scent tickling his nostrils. He slowly entered his thick fingers into her cunt, her juices soaking his fingers almost immediately, causing squelching sounds as he forced his fingers deep. Luffy could tell Nami was moaning again from the hum against his cock, and he slowed down his thrusts so he could focus on making her scream instead. Luffy curled 2 fingers inside of her, broaching her walls until he found the ridged edge of her G-spot, stroking it incessantly while pressing his thumb against her clit. It only took seconds before her walls began fluttering against his thick fingers, and very soon after, she was screaming around his cock as her thighs shook violently, forcing Luffy to hold her legs down lest she falls over. Luffy stopped thrusting his cock in her mouth and let her orgasm settle before sliding his out of her abused throat with a loud pop. Luffy let out a choked grunt when he finally looked down at Nami. Thick strands of my spit ran down Nami's face, clinging to her left cheek and over her right brow. There were strands around her eyes, less opaque as they mixed with her tears. Even more, strands ran down into her hairline and coated her beautiful orange strands. She looked completely debased, and Luffy almost came from the sight. Luffy's voice came out low and dark with desire. "You look gorgeous like this, Nami, covered like this." Nami locked eyes with him, and Luffy finally noticed how glazed over they were. "Luff," she murmured, her voice light, high and unfocused. Luffy's cock twitched from that, and he swallowed deeply to control himself. "You haven't yet, do it inside my filthy throat. I want your delicious all over me," Nami said seductively, making a very SXY pose, her large breast making her look like a goddess. Luffy rubbed his cock against her face, spreading around his pre and her saliva and making a bigger mess of her model-worthy face. Nami let out a pleased sigh at his actions and held her mouth open, waiting for him to fill it up. He obliged her, slowly pressing until he slated his pelvis against her face once more. He petted her throat as he sawed in and out it, chasing his release now. Her throat was gushy and warm, and her muscles pressed tightly against his shaft. It wouldn't take long. Luffy's balls were churning, ready to engorge her gut with his seed. "I'm gonna come. Gonna fill your stomach up," Luffy snarled as he started pounding her, excess saliva splattering his groin with each thrust now. fuck, hear it, fucking take it. Luffy roared as his orgasm flooded out of him, his spen splashing against Nami's throat and settling in her stomach. He pulled out, knowing in this state he might actually drown Nami with his, and let the rest of it splatter across her tits and stomach. Thick opaque stands shine in the low light of the room. Covered in his spunk, her face dripping with and saliva, she was a work of art. Luffy took in a deep breath after the productive orgasm and brought his stained cockhead to Nami's mouth. She wrapped her lips around it, suckling and swirling her tongue under his foreskin and diligently cleaning him before letting go of it with a pop. So amazing, Luffy muttered in awe. But they weren't done yet, especially Nami, who wanted more. Slowly, his fingers entered her moist. Nami just whimpered as her lover continued to finger her inner walls that began to turn wet from his fondling of her breast while he joined in her fingering while she bit her lips while both her fingers and Luffy's wriggled into her hot core and dragged themselves against her walls. Yes, right there, please don't ever stop, Nami moaned, feeling close from his fingers. Luffy smirked and kept fingering his girlfriend, his mouth sucking and licking her pink nipple. Nami moaned louder, completely lost in the pleasure, thrusting Luffy's head deeper into her breasts as her body released. Ooh fuck yes, Luffy, Nami screamed in pleasure, her grip around her captain's head finally eased, not that Luffy minded. Luffy licked Nami's breasts before laying back to allow the latter to sit over his face with her just waiting for his tongue, and the orange-haired woman reached down and spread her folds apart in front of his face. Luffy's tongue started smoothly tracing around Nami's folds, and the dark-haired slightly sad-ass stomach. He licked around her navel, causing her to breath heavy before her lover kissed her stomach one last time to kiss his way back down to her womanhood where he teased her clit licking nice and slowly. Yees, more, I love your tongue, she screamed in pleasure. Luffy was a master when it came to eating her, he was a master at everything. Nami moaned as she felt Luffy's hot tongue circle her clit before he started constantly focused on her clit before finally having his tongue enter her moist entrance. Luffy thought his girlfriend's insides tasted perfect as he gripped her inner thighs to keep them spread apart and trailed his tongue on the inside of the gorgeous woman as she felt his tongue in her wet insides. Luffy licked into Nami's warmth while she gripped her left breast and fondled it. At the same time, she started fingering her clit to add to her wetness. And the sight was quite hot for the captain as his erection still stood tall, which Nami smiled at in delight while his tongue dragged as her walls to taste her wetness. Yes, right there, don't stop, eat me. Nami fondled her breast as her finger rubbed her clit slowly and delicately to increase her chances of releasing her fluids onto Luffy's tongue, which also helped increase those chances she had. The dark-haired male's tongue moved sideways inside his lover as she moaned in response and gave him more wetness to taste as she played with her clit before she used her index and middle finger to spread her folds apart more so as to tease herself, and it worked as she turned wetter than she was a second before thanks to the combined efforts of her fingering and Luffy's tongue licking vastly into her warmth, and the slender navigator blush did disappear as her lover's hot dug its way into her. Luffy moved his hands closer to Nami's warmth and replaced her hands as he spread the folds apart while Nami moaned louder and gripped both her large breasts to rub them together. Nami's wetness seeped onto Luffy's raging tongue while he licked into it while Nami aroused herself even more by toying with her large mounds. And soon she felt herself about to fully release her inner fluids into his awaiting mouth. Yees Luffy, deeper, fuck me with your tongue. Luffy rubbed his fingers on her folds at the same time he licked into the moist area to tease the beautiful woman sitting above his face before he moved her hands behind her to grip her plump ass to grope it as Nami bit her lip while still playing with her tits. Yeesssss of fuckkyesss. Nami let out a loud moan as she squeezed her breasts as tightly as she could, and her inner fluids came streaming out of her womanhood into Luffy's mouth, where he hungrily licked the delicious fluids that poured onto his tongue. Luffy cleaned Nami's clean until there was none left. Nami, you taste better than any meal, Luffy said to Nami as she got off of him and sat next to him before she smiled at him in response and gripped his cock to see how hard he turned from tasting her innards. And you feel great. Come on. I've a reward for you before we get started, Nami said, and a moment after that, Luffy lay back on the sand while she lowered her upper body down to his cock with her on her knees with the dark-haired male's length just in front of her face. Nami licked her lips at the erection before she gripped it to start jerking Luffy off while she rubbed her thumb on the top of it, and he smiled at how tender her hand felt on his manhood. Nami stroked the erection and used her free hand to gently grip his balls to bounce them in her palm while she stroked the erection over and over. Nami trickled her fingers on Luffy's testicles before she placed her mouth on the head of his large erection and started moving her tongue on his emerging foreskin, causing him to lie back and moan loudly at how warm her tongue was. Nami's dark brown eyes looked up at him to wink as she sucked his cock and circled her tongue on it before she stopped everything altogether. Before Luffy did anything, Nami gripped her breasts and sandwiched his strong manhood between her bosom, and the captain groaned from how incredibly soft the mounds were. Nami started massaging Luffy's cock, and he started breathing heavily as the large orbs smothered his manhood and started rubbing it while he completely sat up as the orange-haired woman rubbed her breasts together on his cock. Luffy's throbbing cock was rubbed by Nami's breasts that completely imprisoned his length while her nipples helped with her erect tits massaging the hardened veins on his length. Luffy sat as he was while Nami's breasts rubbed together on his cock while she smiled at him and her ass began to sway from side to side, and she stroked the dark-haired's manhood with her breasts, the soft mounds smothering his cock and rubbing her erect nipples on his hardened veins. "Oh, Nami, keep doing that," Luffy moaned, breathing heavily. Nami smiled triumphantly as if she had just scored a point. Nami then opened her mouth wide and took it into her mouth, and Luffy returned the favor by beginning to make small thrusts into the cleavage that held his length within, along with the busty female's warm mouth. Nami let out a muffled moan at how warm Luffy's cock was in her mouth as she moved her head back and forth on his manhood, intent on making him. She sucked deeper. The feeling of his cock made her want more, sucking more and more. She couldn't get enough of sucking his cock, her tongue circling the head and length, feeling the veins twitch in her mouth, his cock covered in saliva. Nami released it making a loud pop sound, sending Luffy another look before sucking more and more. She loved sucking his cock. Nami rubbed her breasts on the member inside her cleavage while Luffy thrust into the mounds and groaned as his cock felt so good. Nami sucked on her lover's manhood as it thrust into her mouth with her hot tongue, and warming saliva completely covered it as her breasts did perfectly in keeping it erected and at its best. Luffy closed his hands tightly, sand flowing through his hands as he sent his cock into Nami's mouth carefully, and she brushed it with her tongue and slowly licked the head of it while stirring it in her mouth with her massaging breasts rubbed the sides of it intently. Nami still worked her head on Luffy's length while he worked his hardness into her mouth in return, making her breasts pleasure the dark-haired male's cock that slowly made its way in her mouth over and over before he groaned, signaling Nami that he would soon release his seed into her mouth. "Nami, I'm close," Luffy warned her, clenching his teeth. That being known, Nami carried on working her mouth and sizable bust on Luffy's cock as it thrust into her carefully before she moaned from how good her lover's member tasted before it came, his taking her mouth by surprise. Nami licked her mouth clean of the semen and swallowed it before she freed it from just her mouth, and she stroked her breasts on it one more time, and Luffy groaned as some of his shot onto her face. She laughed and wiped it off before freeing Luffy's member, which was still hard, and the two smiled at this. "Luffy, you sure have some good," Nami said as she placed herself over Luffy and laid on top of him, pressing her breasts into his muscular chest. "Thanks a lot, Nami," Luffy said in response before Nami pressed her lips against his, and they make out. Luffy wrapped his arms around Nami's back and slid his hands down her back to enjoy her warm, tender skin while she felt his muscular shoulders as he moved to groping the curves of her ass. Nami then placed her hands on Luffy's chest to keep him still as they separated lips, and she lifted her rear over his still erect cock. Her womanhood was just over Luffy's cock, and he placed his hands on her ass to help lower her onto his waiting cock. "Fuck me, Luffy, make me scream," Nami whispered in his ear. Luffy smirked, biting her neck softly before thrusting his cock in her. "Oh yes, fuck me," Nami screamed, iced her hands on Luffy's shoulder while he gripped her waist and pounded into her tight womanhood. Nami felt Luffy's member go deep into her and moaned with his erection slamming into the female's while her breasts started to jiggle in response. Nami started rolling her hips in correspondence with Luffy's thrusts into her warming, and her ass kept landing on his lap. Nami blushed as she rolled her hips and managed to hold onto Luffy's shoulders before he sat up to kiss her bouncing breasts. while he cupped them and kneaded the orbs together while she still held onto his shoulder while he pounded into her slender form. Luffy moaned as the bouncing orbs jiggled in his palms as he rubbed them together while pressing his thumbs into the spaces underneath her nipples to tease them. The couple moaned loudly while Nami continued rolling her hips with Luffy pounding into her while fondling her breasts, and she whimpered as she worked her hips while the dark-haired thrust into her inner tunnels. Luffy then rested his head against Nami's chest to plant his lips on her bouncing right mound to kiss and taste it slowly before tenderly biting into it. Nami whimpered as she held Luffy's face to her jiggling breasts as she felt his cock crash into her womanhood and just rode it. Yes, yes, yes Luffy, right there, ooh fuck me. She ran her fingers through Luffy's hair while he moved his hands to grip her ass as she rolled her hips in an excellent correspondence with the dark-haired male thrusts. Luffy held onto Nami's ass as he thrust into her tight womanhood that milked his every movement as he pounded into her, and she pressed his face into her bosom. Nami moaned as she felt Luffy's member send ripples of pleasure down her body while he moved his cock into her sharply, while her walls grinding it with her movements in excellent tandem with his, and the dark-haired male held onto Nami's ass as it clapped on his lap. He released her ass momentarily to reprise his role of groping her bouncing breasts, and he held them together to press his lips on her nipples to suckle them. Luffy's length pummeled Nami's weak spot, and that was a sharp motivation to keep working her hips as her hot walls warmed the cock. Luffy twirled his tongue around the nipples that jiggled in front of his face as he caressed both of them and rubbed them together constantly as he made them jiggle with his vigorous thrusts that rocketed in the slender woman's warmth that surrounded his length. Luffy tasted Nami's tits as he helped them bounce in his hands before he took his mouth off the delicious orbs and looked into his lover's face, brown eyes gazing deeply into dark ones with breathtaking passion before they kissed, and Luffy fell back, taking Nami with him. Nami was then on all fours over Luffy's body while they still had their lips pressed together while her breasts still heaved over his chest. Luffy pounded into Nami as she now just rode his length without working her hips and sat as she was while keeping her hands placed on her lover's shoulders for perfect balance as she felt her ready to come soon. Nami and Luffy still kissed as he fondled the large breasts heaving over his chest and pressed his palms into the mounds that overfilled his hands, and she moaned inside the kiss with her ass slapping against his lap. Luffy's member pounded into Nami's moist walls until they finally tightened around it, allowing a strong amount of semen to come bursting out of it and into the female orange-haired womb. Both Luffy and Nami moaned as they came in similar moments while the mix of semen and inner juices came trailing out of her womanhood and streamed from down the male dark-haired's length onto the sand. Nami caught her breath as she fell flat onto Luffy and kept her lips pressed against his while he ran his hand through her hair lovingly while she placed her palm on his cheek and stroked it with her thumb before the pair broke the kiss. "Nami, that really was amazing," Luffy asked. "I'll say, Luffy," Nami responded as she got off Luffy's member and lay next to him while resting her head on his chest and cuddling him. "Say, Nami, yeah, you wanna do another round?" Luffy asked. "Sure thing," Nami replied with enthusiasm, "tomorrow." "How did you guys sleep last night?" "I didn't sleep that well, keep hearing screams, who knows what it was?" Zoro asked with a smirk on his face as Sanji was trying his hardest not to kick his captain in the balls. Vivi made a sound similar to a strangled cat. She knew what Zoro was talking about a bit too well. Last night, she had woken up hearing the screams. She told herself many times to go back to sleep, but the curiosity got the better of her, only to find her captain pounding the navigator like there was no tomorrow. Vivi knew she should have gone back. Instead, she moved her fingers to her dripping, reliving herself and thinking that it was Luffy doing the same thing to her. Usopp raised an eyebrow in confusion. Unlike the rest, he slept perfectly and had no idea what his nakamas were talking about. "This is not fair," Sanji cried out to the heavens above. Nothing but endless desert for miles ahead. It felt as if they had been traveling for hours now. The sun had just risen up in the sky, and the crew was following Vivi behind since she knew the place much more than them due to Luffy's abilities. They had plenty of water, and the danger of dehydration was gone. However, they still needed to eat food. That was the difficult part. Luffy had told his crew his ability to make it rain was something he could do only if there were at least some clouds up in the air. He could do nothing if there were no clouds for miles ahead. Looking up, Nami could see no clouds. Sanji, Zoro, and Luffy were holding the majority of their bags. with a little help from Usopp. Nami was holding a backpack. She didn't want to leave it to them to carry everything, and so was Nico. The only ones not carrying anything were Chopper and Vivi. Nami's brown eyes went to her sister. Something was a bit off. She wasn't sweating, despite the high temperature, and she was carrying over 20 kilograms of items in her bag. Despite that, she wasn't sweating, and she didn't look tired in the slightest. She could understand why the case could be for the princess. She was born and raised in Alabasta after all, but even someone like her was sweating slightly. Nico wasn't sweating, not even a little. Her breathing was completely normal, and from what she noticed, it seemed this detail was noticed by Chopper and Luffy as well. "Geez, just how much further should we go?" Usopp blurted out, his tongue sticking out like a dog in heat, and it didn't help that he felt sand in every part of his body, not knowing how it got there. "Don't worry, Usopp. Vivi says we are close. Worst case scenario, we need to spend another day in the desert," Luffy replied instead of the princess with a thoughtful look on his face. Luffy's right. Yuba is nearby, is close to an oasis. There will be plenty of food and water there, Vivi said, encouraging her crew to keep moving forward. Hearing they were getting close brought a dark look upon Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji's faces. If the information was correct and there was no reason for it not to be, there were over 500,000 rebellious soldiers there. The captain had spoken with them last night telling them what to do in case things got ugly, which could happen way too easily. "What should we do, Captain?" Sanji questioned, his voice void of emotions, a cigarette between his lips. "Once we arrive there, we must take into account that they might not believe Vivi. Many of them might even blame her, saying she's just trying to put the guilt of her father into Crocodile, the great pirate who helps them," Luffy said grimly, his voice cold and his face blank. Sanji usually would jump in defense of the princess if things weren't so serious, but when things got serious, he knew to pull out his serious mask and act like a pirate. Zoro grunted before nodding his head in agreement. "What do you suggest we do, Captain?" "If things go well, we simply kill Crocodile and his little group. If the rebellious blame Vivi and don't trust her, then we get away and plan something, but if they dare to attack, protect the crew," Luffy ordered, his voice alone sending shivers into their bodies. Despite being their captain, they knew just how powerful Luffy was. They escaped their grimly thoughts when they heard a loud noise getting closer. Looking around, trying to figure out where it was coming from. Usopp was the first to pinpoint the direction of the noise. "Right there," he shouted, pointing his index finger at a large amount of sand flying in the air, and getting closer, almost like a small sandstorm. Usopp put his hand on his forehead to see better, and he could see a small, what at first looked like a horse getting chased by a giant lizard. "Ah, a giant lizard," Usopp shouted in a panic the moment he understood what he was looking at. Now, as it got closer to the crew, they could see it was a camel running away from it in panic. "That lizard must be delicious," Luffy shouted. His eyes suddenly looked like meat, and it seems Zoro and Sanji were thinking the same thing. The camel reached them before hiding behind Nami. The giant weird-looking lizard was about to attack the navigator when its head was kicked hard by Sanji, his chest slashed across, killing instantly. "I killed it first," Zoro murmured with a sword in his mouth. "On your dreams, Moss Head," Sanji shouted, landing on the sand. "Good job, guys, now, we can finally eat," Luffy shouted, drooling from his mouth. It didn't take long for everyone to sit and eat together. They found an excellent place to be under a shadow because of a large-looking rock. "So, what's his deal?" Luffy asked with his mouth full of meat, pointing at the camel over his shoulder who was looking at Nami with literal hearts in his eyes, earning a raised eyebrow from Zoro, Sanji grumbling in anger yet again. Usopp wondered why a camel would be interested in a female human. Chopper walked up to it, saying something that the crew couldn't understand. Knowing the attention was on him, the camel turned to look at the men of the crew with an indifferent look. He spoke something with Chopper, who started translating. "Hi, I'm a harmless camel just passing by. Thank you for saving my life, I appreciate it, but I don't give rides to males, so piss off," Chopper translated with the camel sticking out his tongue mockingly towards the male group whose eyebrows were twitching. "Ah," the camel screamed as Luffy, Zoro, Sanji, and Usopp were kicking it without mercy. "We just saved your worthless ass. Who do you think you are?" they shouted with Chopper trying to stop them, reminding them that Nami, Nico, and Vivi could ride on it. Nami slowly walked up to the camel, trying to calm them down. "Calm down, guys. He's such a gentleman." Nami stopped them before caressing the camel's head, whose eyes turned to hearts all over again. "Pervert, worthless, stupid horse," the trio murmured under their noses. After resting for half an hour, they were yet again making their way towards Yuba. Nami was humming as the good camel was allowing her, Nico, and Vivi to ride on top of him, with the camel sending the rest of the crew mocking looks, making them rethink the reason why they even saved that worthless piece of shit. "I swear if that horse mocks us again, I will eat it for dinner," Luffy grumbled, sending a glare. The others didn't bother correcting him but simply nodded in approval. After hours of walking, a storm slowly started to hit them. Luffy used his devil fruit to ease it up a bit. Despite the sand flying around, they could clearly see the image of buildings getting closer. "Is that it?" Luffy questioned skeptically, using his observation haki. He couldn't feel a single soul there, except one, but not the army he had expected. Getting closer, now the city was clear to them, or what was left of it. Vivi jumped from the camel. Walking in the front, she protected her face with her hand. Seeing clearer now, she gasped in horror. Something is not right with the town. What happened here? She asked no one in particular. Looking closer, the whole crew was shocked by the large sandstorm right in the town. Luffy narrowed his eyes, raising his arms in the air. "A sandstorm? A sandstorm is hitting the town," Vivi shouted in panic. Luffy raised his arm, causing the storm to go away slowly. After a whole minute, the storm had disappeared on the horizon. The Straw Hat drank water, and the captain was about to ask Vivi if they were at the right place when they heard a sound. The whole crew turned to notice an older man digging in the sand with a shovel. He was standing in a sand-filled riverbed. "Travelers, it's been quite a while since I have seen anyone around here," the old man spoke. He was an older man with a bushy, white mustache. His body was thin and weathered from a harsh life in the desert. "What happened to Yuba?" Vivi asked, but more like shouting, barely keeping her voice in control. The town looked nothing like she remembered. All the water from the oasis was gone. "I hate to break it to you, but Yuba has been hit by sandstorms for 3 years now. The oasis has been buried deep underneath the sand," the old man explained with a sad tone, looking up at the crew. Vivi's eyes widened in horror, gasping from shock, falling to her knees in absolute despair. Another town was gone. Another town she remembered was gone, no longer looking like the paradise she remembered. Seeing the princess's mood, Nami and Nico walked up to her, putting a confronting hand on her shoulders. Luffy took a step forward, looking at the old man still digging in the sand. He didn't know what he was trying to accomplish, but from the state of the town and the lack of people here, everyone quickly figured the rebellion army wasn't around, at least not anymore. "Where are the rebellious? Do you know where their base is?" Luffy questioned the old man, whose welcoming eyes suddenly hardened to glare, and the grip on his shovel tightened, causing it to creak. "Are you with them?" he questioned with a low, dangerous tone before throwing various objects mainly at Usopp and Chopper, who was desperately trying to dodge them, the latter quickly hiding himself behind Zoro's leg, using it as a shield. "What are you doing, old man?" Usopp shouted, after dodging from buckets to pickaxe. "We are not with the rebellion," Vivi quickly said, which seemed to ease the tension. The old man gave them all a wary look, focusing on Vivi a bit longer but eventually turning to dig in the sand. "They're not here," he shouted, pushing the shovel with his feet down. Using his strength, he threw the sand away. "The fools left the town once the oasis wasn't around anymore to supply them with water. Their base is in Kotoria now," the old man answered. "Kotoria?" Vivi exclaimed. "Kotoria? Where is that place, Vivi?" Nico questioned, none of them knowing where that was. "Is near Nanohana." "Ah, why did we waste our time coming here?" Usopp shouted, his jaw dropping on the sand. "Wait, Vivi? Did you just say, Vivi?" the old man questioned, looking at the crew again, suddenly making his way over to them. "Dang it," Nico cursed for saying her name out loud. The old man looked at Vivi closely. Is it really you, princess?" the old man asked with tears building up in his eyes. Vivi was lost for words, not knowing how the man would react knowing she was the princess. "It's really you," the man said with now tears rolling down his old cheeks, his voice sounding as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Yes, Vivi answered with the old man openly crying. Don't you remember me? I know I have gotten older and perhaps lost a bit of weight but not that much, the old man said, understanding that his face must have changed drastically for the princess not to recognize him. Looking closely, Vivi's eyes widened, a flash of a much different face in front of her face, a healthier face, a wider face. Old man Toto. Recognizing him now, the old man nodded his head, confirming everything. Toto? Luffy tilted his head to the side, not recognizing the old man's name. You have returned home. You have finally. He stopped before falling on the sand with a huff, kneeling in front of the princess. Please, princess, stop the rebellion. They are all fools. They think the king betrayed this country, but I know your father would never do this to us, never. I tried so many times to change their times, talking to them, telling them this was a fool's errand. The old man spoke, keeping his face down, not bearing to look at her. Vivi closed her mouth with her hand, crying herself. She couldn't believe the state Toto was reduced to. They have been here for a long time. I tried and tried, but all fell on deaf ears. They're all cornered into a corner like animals. After the oasis of Yuba was no more, they all left. They're convinced to bring the fight straight to the king. You must stop them, your grace. If you don't, there will be a... He stopped speaking, choking into a sob. The images of his son lying dead in the sand. His blood everywhere was a nightmare come true. Hundreds of people killing each other. The king's head on a spike for all to see. And all the rebellious cheering for the fall of the tyrant. Vivi crouched at his level, putting a hand on his shoulder, her own tears rolling freely on her cheeks, dripping into the sand. I will stop them, Toto. I won't allow a single innocent blood to drop. I will stop them before anyone innocent dies, Vivi promised with resolve in her voice. The crew had backed away a little to give them a little space. Still, they all gave Vivi a nod, telling her that she had their support to stop Crocodile. Even though Luffy doubted they would be able actually to stop them before innocent blood was spilled. He had been told and seen it himself many times that things don't usually go how we want. That is life slapping you in the face, showing that the world could be a cruel place. Thank you, princess, the old man said with all his heart. The princess helped him to stand up, and the old man showed them a comfortable inn they could spend the night and continue their journey tomorrow. The rest of the crew were resting, except Zoro, who was training, and Sanji, who was making something for everyone, tea and a bit of food. Thanks to Luffy's reigning ability, he had more than enough water to boil it and use it for cooking. Luffy, on the other hand, walked up to the old man, who was surprisingly still digging into the 1-meter deep hole in the sand, not showing any signs of being tired. The captain smiled slightly. He's a bit like Gramps, he thought. Despite being old, they were both much more than what they looked at first. What can I do for you, young man? The old man questioned, still digging and not looking at Luffy. For a brief moment, the captain wondered if the old man had heard him approaching or had used observation Haki somehow, but quickly dropped it, walking up to the edge of the hole. Why are you digging? The old man threw sand away with his shovel, using his forearm to wipe away the sweat from his forehead and his reddened cheeks. Despite staying under the sun the whole day long, his skin wasn't burned. Many think the oasis of Yuba is no more, but the king entrusted me with this city. I know for sure there's water down there, the old man explained, spreading his arms around at the end as if to say that the whole place had water underneath. I see. Well, let me help you, Luffy said with a broad smile. The old man briefly glanced at the weird boy with a straw hat. He's odd, he thought, before throwing him a spare shovel. What's your name, young man? Toto asked curiously. Monkey D. Luffy, future pirate king, Luffy said with a broad smile. The old man raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything. Quickly Luffy started digging without stopping, much faster than the old man. Within 10 minutes, his hole was much deeper than that of Toto. Now, Luffy was using a bucket attached to a rope to carry up and throw away the sand. The old man was helping him as well. During the whole time, Vivi was looking at them from the inn, a smile spreading on her face. Seeing her captain helping Toto like that made her heart beat faster before she even realized she was making her way over to them. Luffy aimed his shovel down after filling another bucket with sand, ready to dig more, when he hit something hard, causing a small crack sound. A stone, I hit a stone, Luffy called out, looking up at the old man whose eyes widened in astonishment. "That's not a stone, that's a sandstone. This is miraculous for us," the old man said, now smiling as much as Luffy. "It is? Yes, Luffy, it means there's water below the area," the princess explained, making herself known to the old man. Luffy had felt her coming using his observation haki. "Princess, what can I do for you?" Toto asked respectfully towards the princess but still smiled as if he hadn't smiled for 3 years. "I want to help as well," Vivi said. Looking to Luffy was. Before the old man could tell her that she didn't need to, Vivi grabbed a shovel before jumping down where Luffy was. The captain backed away a little to give her space. "The more, the merrier," she said before starting to dig as well. Luffy smiled at her resolve, her hoodie no longer covering her beautiful blue hair from the sand and dirt around them. Not that Vivi cared if her hair got full of sand. Both of them dug, the old man carrying the buckets with sand up and down from the now deep hole. After half-hour of digging together and perhaps over 50 buckets full of sand with the help of Toto, both Vivi and Luffy prepared to dig more when water started coming out, slowly filling the hole up to their heels. "Princess, Luffy?" Toto called them, looking worried, noticing they weren't digging anymore. "Water," Vivi said weakly with tears before saying much louder. "There's still water in Yuba," she shouted in pure joy, her voice even heard by the rest of the Straw Hats. Luffy laughed and wasn't prepared for Vivi to throw herself at him, giving him the biggest hug of his life. "Thank you so much, Luffy," she said, her words muffled by his shirt. The captain rubbed her back, and the old man standing at the edge of the hole was crying happy tears, seeing water after a very long time. Climbing up, Toto asked how much water was down there. Luffy explained that a pool had formed where they were. "A pool?" Toto questioned. Before Luffy could answer, the old man grabbed the bucket they used to remove sand, throwing it down. The old man was delighted to hear a splash sound. "You have done it, Monkey D. Luffy. You have hit the top of the aquifer. This proves that Yuba could still be rebuilt and considered a place to live," Toto explained, wiping away tears using his hand. Using the bucket, all three tasted fresh water. The old man felt he was getting younger already when his lips tasted the water of this city. A few minutes later, Vivi and Luffy walked together toward the rest of the crew. Toto was behind doing something in the hole but promised he would join the others very soon. Vivi looked at Luffy from the corner of her eyes. She couldn't stop the blush from engulfing her face like a fire. He's such a kind man. He might be a pirate, but he's a pirate full of joy, a man who spreads happiness and laughter, she thought, instinctively her fingers playing with her hair. She suddenly stopped walking. The captain turned to look at her in concern, seeing the princess looking down at her fingers. "Vivi, are you alright?" Luffy asked, concerned. The princess spoke nothing, now getting more worried. He put a hand on her shoulder, causing her tense shoulder to slump down. Only now Luffy noticed she was breathing heavily with a blush across her cheeks. Slowly she lifted her face to look at her captain, her eyes red from crying, her cheeks puffy. "Luffy," she spoke warmly, her voice husky, her eyes looking at him with love, her voice much more different than usual. The captain didn't see it coming. When the princess palmed his face with her incredibly soft hand and kissed him right on the lips, he was taken aback for a moment before quickly returning the kiss, his hands going around her waist, bringing her closer to him, feeling her soft breasts against his chest. The princess had no idea what she was doing. This was her first kiss, so she allowed Luffy to take control of their movement. The kiss muffled a moan when his tongue wanted entrance in her mouth. Opening her mouth, she felt pleasure just by his lips. Every part of her body was on fire. Her hands moved to his hair, her hand going through his dark hair, her other hand touching his well-developed chest. Pulling away a string of saliva connecting them, she opened her eyes to look at him, the face of the man she had come to love. "I thank you for everything, Luffy," she whispered softly, leaning forward, her arms around his back, her head resting on his chest, enjoying the way he was caressing her hair. "You have a beautiful personality, Vivi, and a beautiful face to add to that," Luffy whispered to her, his words making her heart beat even faster. "So do you." The new couple didn't notice Nami looking at them with a sly smirk, licking her lips seductively before returning to the others. Arriving there, the others noticed her happy attitude. Nico quickly realized what had happened. While Sanji suddenly got the urge to kick his captain, again. "This world is cruel," He cried with anime tears on his face. Zoro laughing out loud while Chopper was confused. Nico Robin the woman was looking at the newcomers with an unsettling smile on her face. That kind of smile that literally said, "I know everything," sort of smile. They hadn't noticed her yet. Mr. 2 was busy making ridiculous dance poses, and Mr. 1 simply minded his own business. But the officers were busy trying to start a fight with each other. Seeing that the situation could get out of control, Robin walked out of a shadow, her hands on her hips, a sly smirk on her face. "I should have known you can't sit still doing nothing for a whole minute, now, can you?" she questioned, amused. Everyone turned to her abruptly. Mr. 1 narrowed his eyes in suspicion. The way Miss Sunday was acting was really off to him. "Please don't mind me, you're welcome to kill each other," she said with amusement. Before anyone could reply to her, a dark chuckle was heard in the room. "Not yet, at least. They are worthless to me as corpses." Everyone turned in time to see a figure forming from sand, sitting on a fancy chair made out of pure gold, decorated with rubies around, and even a cigarette formed out of the sand on his mouth. His eyes were cold like ice. His presence caused almost everyone to gasp in shock, now recognizing who their leader was. Robin smirked slyly before walking up to the warlord, turning around to fully face the others. "Let me introduce you to your boss. One of the 7 warlords of the sea, Mr. Crocodile."